Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of viewers aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this content, hit that subscribe button. It really helps keep these long stories coming. Also, for even more police horror stories, check out my new channel. The link's in the description and pinned comment. I'd love it if you stop by and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. What time is it where you are and which city are you listening from tonight? Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into it. It all started 3 nights ago, just south of Fort Lauderdale, on the A1A highway. It was 18 minutes past midnight. As far as I can remember, the date was June 24th, 2025, and the road was covered in water. My windshield wipers were moving quickly, trying to keep up with the heavy rain, but the front glass still looked like a foggy mirror. I was passing through Collins Avenue on a routine call. 2 drunk people seemed to be arguing over a parking spot, nothing unusual. I gave a code 4 before I got there. By the time I finished my report, the rain had slowed to a light drizzle, and traffic had thinned out, so I decided to take the long way. About 100 meters past the last neon lights of Lauderdale by the Sea, I saw something strange. A gray minibus parked on the sand, its headlights off, doors tightly shut. There were no tire tracks in front of it, no footprints in the sand dunes, just there it was. I slowed down and started looking through the rain. There was no license plate. I turned on my blue lights. They reflected off the wet asphalt, illuminating the area in short bursts. The minibus didn't move. I drove up to the minibus, parked my car, put it in park, and grabbed my flashlight and service weapon. As I got out, the rain began to soak my raincoat, each drop hitting the metal of my badge with a soft clink. I aimed the light at the side of the minibus. Under the sliding door, there was a single word written in mud: "Help me." The letters were blurred, probably due to the storm. Half of them had been erased, but they looked like they had been there for a long time, forming a crust. I immediately radioed the station. Unit 12. I've spotted a suspicious vehicle on A1A. No license plate, help me, written on the side door. Requesting backup and K9. Over. My voice echoed in my helmet. I waited. 2 minutes later, a crackling voice came through. Unit 12. Backup will be there in 8 minutes. Roger that. Over. In this weather, 8 minutes felt like an hour. I aimed my flashlight at the sand dunes, waiting for someone to emerge, trapped or hiding. There was nothing. Only the distant rumble of thunder and the lonely, eerie sound of the sea could be heard. I circled the van, leaning in to look through the tinted windows. The glass was fogged inside, but I caught movement. A figure crouched on the floor behind the driver's seat. I tapped the glass with my flashlight's metal end. The figure didn't move. I knocked louder, and finally the head snapped up. A man, mid-30s, dark hair plastered to his forehead by the rain, eyes wide and wild. He mouthed something. Couldn't hear it. I backed away, heart thudding. Before I could raise my radio, the sliding door whooshed open. He lurched out, face streaked with tears and dirt. He clutched something wrapped in a towel, pressed it to his chest. I yelled, "Freeze! Don't move!" My hand hovered over my holster. He staggered toward the dunes as if he didn't hear me, stumbling in and out of vision. I chased him across the wet sand, boots slipping. A clap of thunder rolled overhead as I called, "Stop!" Miami-Dade PD. His pace quickened. Then he dipped into a shallow depression in the dunes. Gone. I reached the spot and shined my light around. No prints in the sand. The ground was churned, but no sign of him. My breath came fast. I turned and saw the towel he'd dropped, draped over a mound of seagrass. I approached slowly, knuckles white around the flashlight. Beneath the towel, bundled tight, was a pair of blood-soaked shoes and a smear of red on sand. Not enough to tell much, but enough to make me swallow hard. I radioed, Unit 12. Suspect entered dunes. Male adult, possibly injured. I've got blood evidence at Dune Delta. Send medics first. 30 seconds later, I heard sirens. Backup coming. I knelt and used a gloved hand to lift the towel's edge farther. What lay beneath was a child's raincoat, bright yellow, caked with mud and something darker. The hood was pulled up, empty. No child, just the coat. Behind me, the cruiser's headlights washed over the scene. I felt the blood drain from my face. I peered toward the dunes, mist swirling like a veil. My radio crackled. Unit 12, approaching at 10 knots. Over. I snapped the towel back. Whoever was out there, man or child, had vanished uphill, into the scrub pines. The rain tapered to a drizzle, and for a moment, the world was eerily calm. I looked down at my boots, now spattered with mud and flecks of crimson. I thought of my daughter at home, sleeping through the storm. I wondered, what would I do if her coat lay in the sand and she was nowhere to be found? I stood, turning slowly to face the dunes. My flashlight beam quivered as I raised it. Then I saw, there, etched in the wet sand, just beyond the tide line, a single handprint, too small for an adult. I swallowed, and that's when I heard it. Laughter. Soft, childlike, echoing off the dunes, just beyond the wavering light. It wasn't angry or frantic, just joyful. A cruel, mocking mirth that sent ice through my veins. I took a step forward, rain seeping into my collar, heartbeat pounding so loud it masked the ocean. The laughter stopped. Silence. Then the wind shifted, carrying a whisper that sounded like my own name. Detective Wade. I froze, half turning my head. My radio chirped again. Unit 12, are you there? Come in. My skin crawled. I raised my voice, trying to sound steady. Yeah, I'm here. I'm fine. I'll secure the scene. But as I spoke, I felt eyes on me. Something watching from the dunes where no one was supposed to be. My gut clenched. And that's where it stands now, suspended between what I can prove and what I can't explain. The laughter, the child's coat, the handprint, none fit into any 6-page report. Backup will be here soon. They'll log the evidence. They'll take photos of the coat and the handprint. They'll ask me the routine questions. What did you see first? Did you chase the suspect? Did you hear anything else? I'll answer. I'll sound calm, professional. But inside, I'm already replaying that laughter. I'm watching that handprint wash away in my mind, and I'm wondering. What the hell just happened out here in the rain? The record light stays on. I don't know if I'll ever stop talking, because if I do, I might never remember the rest. Rain fell in irregular sheets, washing the sand into gritty rivulets that carved winding channels toward the sea. I kept the recorder running, though my fingers trembled on its casing. I pressed it against my palm as I stepped closer to the dune's edge, where the yellow raincoat lay like a severed memory. Behind me, headlights flickered through the mist, backup arriving. But I couldn't tear my gaze away from the dune depression where I'd heard that laughter. I reached the base of the dune and kicked aside a handful of sand. Beneath, I found something slimy and half-buried. A waterproof pager, its screen cracked and dark. It wasn't registered to any number in dispatch, I checked. It had no sticker, nothing. Just scratched letters on its back. EC in hurried scrawl. I tucked it into my pocket, knuckles throbbing. I looked up and saw Officer Ramirez slipping out of his cruiser, raincoat hood shielding his face. He jogged over, flashlight in one hand, radio in the other. You okay, Wade? He called softly, voice muffled by the rain. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Found this, I said, holding out the pager. Cracked screen, no ID. Letters, EC. He frowned. No call logs? That's weird. He tapped the side. Nothing lit up. We'll tag it as evidence. You sure no one else would have dropped it? I shook my head. Van was empty when I got here. No prints besides mine. I pointed uphill. And whoever, man or child, ran into those scrub pines. He shone his beam into the vegetation. Twisted palmettos and scrub oaks formed a low canopy, but nothing beyond the leaves. No footprints, I added. Too many small creatures out here. Night crawlers, raccoons. Nothing would hold a track. But that handprint in the sand, too small to be human adult. Ramirez stepped closer to the dune crest, elbowing aside branches. Then he froze, flashlight beam scanning the ground. Detective, he whispered. I joined him, heart beating against my ribs. On the dune's ridge, half hidden by grasses, was a child's rubber boot. Bright red, with faded cartoon ducks printed along the side. One boot, no pair. It rested on firm ground, not sand, its opening pointing toward the inland scrub. I swallowed. That was where no water reached, I said. High tide line is 50 feet east. This is uphill. I crouched and ran a gloved finger along its sole. No scuffs, no grit. Clean, like someone placed it there deliberately, not kicked off in flight. Ramirez nodded slowly. This is serious. He moved to radio it in, then paused. Wait, do you smell that? He cocked his head, nostrils flaring. I inhaled, but all I caught was rain and salt. Like decay, he said. Sort of. Suddenly, a low hiss came from somewhere downhill, near the broken dune channels. Lustrous sand trickled into darker pools. That hiss was out of place, like air escaping from under wet cloth. I stood and swept my beam down. The dunes glowed pale in the vanishing drizzle. Beneath a draped mound of sea grapevines, I saw movement. A dark shape shifting under branches. Hey, I yelled, come out with your hands up. My voice cracked. The shape paused, then slid sideways into a cluster of trees. I took a step forward, but Ramirez grabbed my arm. Hold, he hissed. We both listened. The hiss repeated, then a sudden rising whimper, childlike, high-pitched, trembling. It echoed in uneven cadences through the palm fronds. I swallowed, blood pounding. You hear it? I asked. Ramirez nodded slowly, flashlight bobbing in his fist. Could be an animal, he said, but I've never heard a raccoon squeal like that. I approached, stepping lightly, chest tight. Branches scratched my jacket as I ducked under. The ground was spongy, marshy, clumps of live oak leaves matted underfoot. Then I saw it. A dark shape huddled behind a palmetto frond, its back turned. It crouched low, knees drawn to chest, head bowed. The yellow hood of the child's raincoat I'd found covered its shoulders, though now it sat empty on the ground beside it. I froze, raising my hand slowly. Hey there, it's okay. Detective Wade, Miami-Dade, PD, we're here to help. My voice was steadier than I felt. The shape shifted, and I realized it was a tiny adult, thin limbs, hands clasped over ears, shaking. But no raincoat on its body, just a thin white t-shirt, soaked and smudged with mud. Its hair was matted. It smelled of wet earth and something metallic. I crouched, trying to look non-threatening. You in pain, hungry, cold? The creature didn't move. I looked to Ramirez, whose jaw was tight. He had radio in hand, but hadn't called it in. Then the handheld pager in my pocket buzzed, silent in the rain, and lit up with a single word on its dark screen. Run. My blood froze. I flipped open the pager. Static splintered through its speaker, then whispered, They're here. The hooded husk behind the palmetto frond jerked. It slowly turned its head toward me. Its face was hidden in shadow, but two pale eyes glowed, reflecting my flashlight. They blinked once, then vanished beneath a sudden blackness. The whimper became a giggle. Soft, childlike, and entirely wrong. As the wind whipped through the scrub pines, that giggle repeated, bouncing between the branches. He, he, he. I stood, backing away as my flashlight beam panned the trees. There was no creature anymore, just empty dappled ground. But ahead, near a fallen palm frond, I saw footprints. They were too small for an adult, too large for a child, narrow, elongated, as if steps taken on stilts. Ramirez shouted, "Detective, behind you!" I spun. In the pale circle of light, I saw a line of footprints leading away, deeper into the scrub, toward a path I'd never noticed before. Part concrete, part mud, like someone had carved a trail. My radio crackled. Unit 12, backup arriving in 2, then cut off. The pager buzzed again. Now, my heart hammered. Rain began to fall again, heavier this time, hammering the leaves overhead. I swallowed the lump in my throat and moved toward the footprints, each step laden with dread. My flashlight trembled, catching glimpses of mottled tree trunks and edges of rusted wire fencing. The natural world here felt wrong. Too silent, too waiting. I glanced back. Behind me, Ramirez stood frozen, eyes wide. "Detective Wade," he whispered. "What do we do?" I didn't answer at once. I dropped to my knees and examined the mud tracks. They were fresh, no animal prints alongside them. They led upward, as if guiding someone to higher ground, into the heart of the scrub. I felt the pager vibrate against my thigh. Follow. My breath caught. The rational part of me screamed to barricade, to radio, to wait for more units. But another voice, cold, distant, whispered inside my head, "Go." I stood, rain dripping off my collar. I swept my flashlight along the path. The footprints ended at a small clearing. In the center stood a rusted trailer, half sunk in muck. Its metal siding streaked with rust and algae. One window was shattered. Shards glistened like teeth. A dim light flickered inside, a candle or some cheap lantern bobbing in the darkness. I glanced back at Ramirez. His face was pale, lips parted. I drew in a breath, steadying. "I'm going in," I said. "Cover if anything happens." He nodded, grip tightening on his radio. As I stepped forward, the dry laugh echoed once more, inside my skull and through the trailer frame. He he he. The door, a warped metal slab, creaked open under my touch. The candlelight flickered across the interior, revealing what looked like small handprints smeared in mud along the walls, trails of dripped slime, and across the floor, the outline of a mattress stained dark. I raised the recorder in my other hand. My pulse pounded in my ears as I whispered, "This is Detective Wade." Entering structure for investigation. Back up, hold position. Silence answered. Then, faintly, from the back of the trailer, I heard what sounded like breathing, slow, deliberate, and rhythmically uneven. I swallowed hard. I took a step inside, and that's where this section ends, on the edge of that rattling breath, in a trailer half buried in muck, with footprints leading straight into the heart of something I don't understand. Too many questions remain. Whose footsteps are these? Who left that pager? And why is there a child's boot resting here, where no child should ever have ventured? The stale air inside the trailer hit me like a fist. Stagnant warmth mingled with the tang of mold, and something far fouler, like rotting seaweed that had washed ashore days ago. My flashlight beam trembled as I swept it across the cramped interior. The walls were warped metal, peeled back like old paint. and everywhere I looked were those tiny handprints in smudged mud, each one pale and slight, as if pressed by fingers too fragile to bear weight. Some ran in straight lines, others formed concentric circles, like someone scratching an invisible message into the wall. I swallowed, forcing my voice low and controlled. "Ramirez, do you copy? I'm inside. Feels like there's at least 2 persons here, maybe more." My radio sputtered with static. I heard footsteps behind me on the warped metal floorboards. Ramirez's beam swung past the doorway, illuminating my breath in the dim light. "Stay safe," he murmured. His tone was steady, but I heard the quaver beneath. I edged forward, every sense flaring. The mattress outline on the floor was heavy with dark stains, brown-black in places, slick and congealed, with small droplets that led away from the center, toward the narrow back alcove. I followed them carefully, boots squelching on wet wood. The breathing grew louder, slow, deliberate, like someone intentionally matching an exaggerated rhythm. As I stepped into the alcove, the flickering candle revealed a small makeshift altar of sorts. A child's. Stuffed rabbit, dirt-caked and threadbare, sat propped against a dented lunchbox smeared in mud. Beneath it lay a bundle of mismatched clothing, tiny socks, a pastel t-shirt, and a cracked handheld video game console with no power. The console's screen was blank, spider-webbed by cracks. It felt like the belongings of a child left behind in terror. Then I saw movement. At the far end of the trailer, half hidden behind a tattered curtain hung as a partition, a figure hunched low. Its breathing was the same, uneven and deliberately drawn. The silhouette looked almost childlike in stature but moved with jerking, unnatural motions. I swallowed and raised my flashlight, its beam grazing the curtain's edge. "Detective Wade," I said softly, voice resonant against the metal walls. "I'm here to help. Show yourself." The breathing paused. Silence pressed in. Then, from behind the curtain came a faint whisper, so soft I almost missed it. "Go." It was a child's voice, half choked, barely more than a sigh. I took a cautious step forward. "Who are you? Are you hurt?" My gun hand rested on the holster, ready but reluctant. "Don't," the voice breathed. "They'll hear." My heart pounded as I grasped the curtain's edge and pulled it aside. The figure crouched in the corner, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around a pale shod ankle. Its face was hidden by tangled hair, but 2 eyes reflected the candlelight, empty, black wells that seemed to drink in the light. The body shuddered, not with cold, but with anticipation. "Hey!" I knelt, extending a gloved hand. The thing tilted its head, gaze snapping to mine. I noticed then that its limbs were oddly elongated, arms too long for its torso, fingers curling like spider legs. A low click came from its throat. My pulse hammered. "Ramirez," I whispered over the radio, "I need you in here. Suspect is—" My words caught in my throat, because it wasn't human, and yet it wore the shape of one. A child, or a child's memory twisted beyond recognition. Before I could finish, the candle winked out, plunging us into darkness. The paneling moaned as the trailer rocked slightly, like a ship in rough seas. I fumbled for my flashlight but felt a soft rush of air at my shoulder. Something passing, brushing the hairs on my neck. Then the candle relit itself, flame sputtering back to life. The creature was gone. The alcove was empty, save for a single red boot standing upright in the center, laces undone and flapping. The handheld console lay open beside it, screen now flickering with static. Snapshots of my own face, illuminated by flashlight beam, recorded earlier tonight at the dune's edge. I recognized myself, blinking in confusion. Breath visible in the cold air of the shore. I scooped up the console and flipped it over. Carved into its back panel were the initials EC, the same letters from the pager. My chest tightened. EC. Whoever, or whatever, this was, had been following me, recording me, leading me here. My radio burst alive. Unit 12, status? Ramirez's voice was urgent. I held up the console toward the curtain. I've got the video, but suspects vanished. Trailer's empty. On my way, he said. I pocketed the console and stepped back, senses screaming. The wind picked up, rattling the trailer's rotted panels. Beneath my boots, the floorboards groaned as if protesting. I approached the doorway, flashlight sweeping. The muddy footprints led right up to the trailer's threshold, then stopped abruptly. No prints outside. I paused, pressing my free hand against the cool metal wall. The rain hammered outside. The trailer's interior was now eerily still, save for my ragged breathing. I glanced at the small altar, rabbit, lunchbox, clothing. It all seemed staged like a shrine. But to what? A lost child? A spirit? A horrifying reverie? My radio crackled again. Detective, we got K9 on site. ETA 30 seconds. Footsteps thundered outside. I exhaled, every nerve taut. The cassette recorder on my desk outside would catch every detail. The handprint, the laughter, the giggle, the shifting shadow, the runaway boot, the creature's empty gaze. But tape couldn't prove what happened here. It would log the inconceivable. I took one last look at the alcove, then turned and headed for the door. As I reached it, I heard it again, the low, deliberate breathing just behind me. I spun, flashlight stabbing across the darkness. Nothing but the dingy interior, the shrine of toys, the empty air. I stepped out onto the threshold and shut the door. It squealed on rusted hinges. Ramirez's boot thumped into the trailer. He flicked on his light, face pale in relief and shock. What the hell happened in here? I shut off my torch and stared down the corridor that we'd just traversed, now empty, now silent. I pressed my palm to the cool metal beside the door, feeling the tremor in my fingers. I don't know, I said, voice hushed. But it's counting on us to find out. And with that, we climbed back into the rain, into the dark night, leaving the trailer behind, but aware that the echoes of what we'd seen would follow us forever. Rain had turned to a steady drizzle by the time we made it back to my cruiser, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the pale mist. Officer Ramirez sat in the driver's seat, radio at his side, eyes fixed on the darkened trailer. I climbed in beside him, leaving the recorder running on the passenger seat, its light blinking steadily. "Video console," I said, handing it to him. He blinked at the crackled screen, silent images of my face flickering in and out of focus. "EC carved it," I added. "Initials from the pager." He tapped the glass, frowned. "What does that stand for? Some code name?" I shook my head, pulling my uniform jacket tighter against the damp. "No idea, but it feels personal." He took a breath, then keyed the mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Trailer search complete. Recommend hazmat on site. Possible biohazard. We've got unidentifiable stains, strange handprints, and a possible non-human subject that fled interior. Over. Static, finally. Copy Unit 12. Hazmat and additional units en route. Hold position. Over." I cut off the radio. Ramirez budged in his seat, then slid the console onto the dash. "So, where do we go from here?" I stared out through the windshield, watching the trailer's dim light fade behind the curtain of rain. "Back to the station," I said. "We process evidence, run the console through tech, see what those initials match in DC records, and we file the mud footprints as evidence. Someone, or something, led us here." He closed his eyes for a moment, then looked at me. "You're really going to review all that tape?" "I have to," I replied quietly. "I need to know who, or what, was filming me before I even knew I was on their radar. He started the engine. The heater kicked on, blowing warm air across the windshield. I could smell coffee from my thermos, strong and bitter, a small comfort. Station lights were harsh on my face when we finally pulled in. Back inside the evidence locker, I wiped the recorder clean of stains, slipped on latex gloves, and set it on the counter. Ramirez brought in the red boot, bagged, the yellow raincoat, bagged, the cracked pager, bagged, and the console, which he locked in a separate case. Each item received a tag. Evidence number 12, A, yellow raincoat. Number 12, B, red child's boot. Number 12, C, cracked pager, initials EC. Number 12D, handheld console. Every label felt inadequate, nothing capturing the dread I'd felt inside that trailer. With the locker secured, we retired to the briefing room. Ramirez closed the door, flicked on the overhead light. The table was littered with photographs. The dune's muddy handprint. Images of the raincoat, the boot, the altar in the trailer. I spread them out, fingertips grazing the glossy surfaces. "Take a look," I said, pointing to the first photo. A single handprint, half erased by footprints and wind. Too small for adult, too big for a toddler. Ramirez leaned in. "Reminds me of those urban legends, amphibious child creatures in the Everglades." He shrugged. "But no one takes those seriously." I felt a surge of frustration. They should. I clicked another photo, the altar, rabbit, lunchbox, child's clothing. A shrine built around absence. If someone made this, they wanted us to find it. He looked up. "A warning?" "A message," I said. "But what?" We sifted through the images, each more unsettling. The slimy pager with mud smeared over the keys. The console's broken screen etched with my trembling reflection. Then, off to the side, a printout from dispatch. You can see my log of the call. Exact GPS coordinates, timeline, but no mention of footprints or that van on the sand. Whoever logged me in must have scrubbed those details. I tapped the printout. "Notice anything?" Ramirez studied it. "They left out that van had no plates and no driver." I exhaled. "They're covering tracks inside the department." He nodded, concern in his eyes. "So, you think someone in PD is involved?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Encrypted alert from tech. "Console data ready for preliminary review." I clicked into the secure folder. The file was corrupted at the beginning, but I managed to open the last few seconds. There I was, breathing hard, flashlight beam bouncing off the dune grass. Then the image cut to black, followed by the trailer's interior. Handprints on walls, the altar, then 2 seconds of static, and finally a close-up shot of the red boot. Then the console died. My heart hammered. That footage was shot after I'd taken the console from the dunes, but before I found the trailer. It meant someone recorded my approach and then recorded the trailer's interior, synchronized somehow with my movements. Ramirez frowned. "They knew exactly where you were." "They knew me," I said quietly. The room seemed to darken. I rubbed my temples. "We need to find who EC is, and fast." He looked around the messy table. "We can't go public with this until we know more. Department will freak out if we mention non-human suspects." I nodded. "We'll keep it internal, but I need your help, Ramirez. I don't want to chase this alone." He nodded firmly. "I'm with you." That night I lay in my dark apartment, sleep out of reach. My phone lay on the nightstand, dozens of missed calls from dispatch, tech, forensic. I silenced them all. In the stillness I heard whispering, soft, just beyond hearing, like someone breathing my name through the cracked window. I sat up and switched on the lamp. Rain streaked the glass, city lights blurred behind it. On the floor, I placed the wet yellow raincoat and the red boot side by side, and between them, the pager. I stared at the initials, EC, and felt an inexplicable pull, like those letters resonated with some buried memory. I flipped open the pager. The screen flickered with static, then went blank. No messages stored. In the dim light, I traced the letters on its back. EC. My mind raced to names. Elisa Carrington, missing since '97. Earl Corbett, ex-con rumored to practice something occult. Nothing made sense. My phone buzzed again. A new message. An anonymous tip. Coordinates for an off-the-grid marsh in the Everglades, not far from where I found the van. It came with a simple instruction. Midnight. Bring light. I stared at the message, heart pounding. I looked at the recorder on the table, the one I'd left running. If I went, the recorder would capture everything. If I didn't, I might never find answers. I reached for my badge, my gun, my mag light. I typed a quick note to Ramirez. Meet me at the marsh. Midnight. Bring Caw 9. Bring backup if you can. As I sealed the text, the whisper returned, right next to my ear. I'll be waiting. My breath caught. I stiffened, hand on the pager. Then silence. I looked at my reflection in the window, haggard, bloodshot, determined. I grabbed the raincoat and slid it on. It clung to me like a promise. At exactly 23:45, I locked the door behind me. I pocketed the pager and slung the recorder in my coat. Rain had stopped. A low mist hovered over the pavement. Headlights of my cruiser cut through the gloom as I approached. I climbed in and started the engine, heart heavy with both dread and resolve. The station's fluorescent lights receded in my rear view. Ahead lay black water and endless sawgrass. Midnight loomed, and I knew, as sure as I knew my own name, that when I reached those coordinates, whatever had been hunting me would be ready. I flicked on the recorder again. The red light glowed. Detective Marcus Wade, I said into the darkness. I'm coming. Inside the console, the tape whirred. Outside, the road stretched on, disappearing into the mist. And that's where this section ends, on the cusp of another descent into something I still can't explain, guided by a pager that whispers my fate, to a marsh where the truth waits in the silence. Rain's given way to a low, bone-deep fog as I turn off US 41 and onto the unmarked service road. The streetlights vanish behind me, and the cruiser's headlights carve twin arcs into the mist. I grip the wheel, knuckles white, and glance at the pager in my coat pocket. Still blank, but warm against the fabric, like it knows where I'm headed. Across the dash sits the recorder, its red light blinking willingness. At 11:58 p.m., I kill the engine. Ramirez follows behind in his unit, K9 alert and ears pricked forward. The dog, Luna, whimpers at the window, nose pressed against the glass. I swallow, step out, and feel the chill settle under my collar. The marsh air smells of brackish water and decaying reeds. Each breath tastes of iron and marsh mud. Here, I murmur, pointing to the ground. The GPS coordinates led us to a small clearing hemmed by sawgrass that arches like cathedral windows. The ground is soggy. I sink ankle-deep into muck, boots coated in slick clay. Ramirez drops a treat by Luna's paws. She sniffs at the perimeter. Pager, I say, handing it to him. He flicks it open. Screen stays dark. No signal? I shake my head. Nothing since last tip. I pat my chest where the recorder sits. Keep eyes peeled. I want audio, not just visuals, of anything that moves. He nods, radio clipped to his shoulder. We'll keep you covered. I step forward into the grass, Luna on a tight leash. The ground slopes downward toward a shallow canal lined with cypress stumps. Radio crackles with distant static. I switch it off. Don't want a stray transmission mixing with what we might record here. The reed canopy muffles sound. It's too quiet. No frogs, no owls, only my breath and Luna's panting. Then, a soft gurgle of water. I shine my mag light along the canal. A shape floats, half submerged, tangled in roots. I approach cautiously, flashlight beam dancing across kelp and fallen leaves. It's a yellow raincoat, the same one from A1A, wrapped around something heavy. I kneel and peel it. Back. Underneath, a child's life jacket, muddy and torn, straps frayed. I feel bile rise. The jacket clasp is broken, its buckle hanging loose. No body, only soaked fabric and a faint pulse of dripping water. I snap a photo with my phone. Ramirez steps in and shines his light. "This was placed here deliberately," he says softly. I stand, pressing my hand to my forehead. "We're being led." The words taste bitter. First the van, then the trailer, now this. Luna whines and tugs toward the reeds. I leash her tighter. Then I hear a whisper carried on the breeze. "Detective." My heart leaps. The voice is so faint I'm not sure I heard it, until I feel breath at my ear. I whirl. No one, only mist swirling through naked branches. I take a step closer to the water's edge. The pager vibrates in my hand, startling me. I open it. Static floods the speaker, overlaid by a child's voice. "Don't trust the light." I stagger back, cold sweat breaking out. The recorder on the dash clicks softly as if it's about to record. I think of the K9 flashlight, Luna's bright eyes in the dark. Ramirez's radio flickers. He calls, "Detective Wade," but crackles. "Don't trust the light," the pager repeats, then goes silent. I shine my flashlight down the canal. Something dark shifts under the water's surface, moving against the current upstream. A glint. Metal? I lean in, heart hammering, and see the outline of a small handprint pressed against the underside of a fallen cypress root. The print is inverted, as if someone pressed their palm from beneath, pushing outward. Mud drips from its edges. I crouch, fingers tracing the roots. The handprint feels impossibly small, but the shape is unmistakable. 5 fingers splayed in a silent plea. My breath catches. This came after the coat was dumped here. Someone returned to leave a message. Above me, Luna barks once. I look up, her leash taut, her ears flat. She stares into the sawgrass. I sweep my light in the same direction. At the edge of visibility, a figure stands. Tall, hollow-eyed, wearing a dark hood. I can't see a face, only an empty space where it should be. I call out, voice shaking, "Come into the light." My flashlight beam finds the figure drifting backward, deeper into the grass. But as it moves, the sawgrass parts like a curtain drawn, and behind it, the canal bank rises to reveal a faint, flickering glow. A cluster of old police flashlights, their beams sweeping in slow, endless circles as if manned. I glance at Ramirez, whose expression is frozen. "What the hell?" I whisper, stepping forward. Each flashlight beam converges on a single spot, about 20 feet up the bank. I approach, Luna growling low. When I reach the cluster, I see why they shine in unison. They're anchored into the ground, pointing inward to a shallow pit lined with flat stones. In the center lies a bundle. Identical swamp boots, yellow raincoat, red boot, the rabbit, the lunchbox. Every item from the past 3 nights arranged like a morbid mosaic. I swallow hard. A shrine, I breathe. Faint footsteps crunch in the muck behind me. I spin. Where the flickering lights leave shadow, I catch glint of glass, eyes watching. A slender hand, pale as bone, reaches from the grass and closes over one flashlight handle. then nothing. The assembled beams flicker and die, plunging me into pitch black. Even Luna's barks seem muffled by the mist. My heartbeat drowns out the soft drip of water. I fumble for the recorder. It clicks on. I press it to my chest. From the darkness, a child's voice, close enough to feel on my skin, whispers, "Your turn." And the lights around the pit flare back to life, one by one, each beam slicing through the fog, illuminating the stones, the offerings, and me. I step back, hand on my holster, breath ragged. The recorder's red light glows. In the wavering beams, the figure steps into view at the far edge of the clearing, faceless, tall, silent. It raises a hand and points at me. Behind that gesture hangs a question I can't answer. Why am I the final piece? Rain's glow swallowed the clearing in shifting beams as I stood frozen, the recorder against my chest humming with every breath. The towering figure at the edge of the pit, faceless, featureless, its long coat merging with the mist, pressed its finger toward me, a silent summons. Luna snarled, hackles raised, but the creature did not move. It simply waited as the dozen flashlights blinked around us like predatory eyes. My gut twisted. Every instinct screamed to run, to dive into the murk and vanish. But the tape in my recorder was still rolling. This was the proof, if I survived, to reveal the impossible. I forced myself forward, boots sinking in slick clay, each step echoing in the hush of the swamp. Ramirez's light wavered behind me. He'd stayed at the marsh's edge, pulling Luna back just out of the glare. I risked a glance over my shoulder. His face was ashen, eyes wide with dread. He raised a hand in caution. I turned back, focusing on the silent sentinel. The stones at my feet, once a random pit, now felt like an altar of accusation, rings carved into the clay leading to this moment. I swallowed, raising my voice so the recorder would capture every tremor. "I'm here. The figure raised an arm, slender and glistening in the torchlight. Its hand, the same thin, spidery fingers I'd glimpsed in the trailer, pointed at the pit. My gaze followed to the center. Something moved beneath the mist. A form wrapped in yellow. A shape too small to be a grown man, but too deliberate. Alive. I stepped closer, heart hammering. Each light around the pit converged, illuminating a bundle of cloth. Drawing in a shaky breath, I knelt at the edge and brushed away a layer of wet sawgrass. Beneath lay me, a pale copy of my face, eyes closed, features slack, skin ashen and wrong. It wore my uniform, identical badge gleaming in the half-darkness. Its chest rose and fell in a shallow, mechanical rhythm, like a doll barely breathing. A cold dread coiled in my gut. I jerked back, nearly toppling into the pit. The figure uncurled its arm, palm up, revealing 4 more tiny handprints pressed into its flesh, mud-streaked and ghostly white. I'd seen those marks before, at the dunes, on the trailer walls, on the roots. I knew what they meant. I was being claimed, cataloged, reproduced. A soft whimper came from the bundle in my lap. I looked down. There, beneath the collar of the uniform copy, was a red boot. One of the boots I'd found scattered like breadcrumbs on this hunt. The replica wore only one. The other lay still, alone by the trench's rim. Beside it, the child's raincoat peeked out over the mannequin's shoulders, hood pulled up. A fragile rabbit-stuffed toy rested in its outstretched hand. I scrambled back, heart racing. The recorder slipped in my coat pocket. My hand closed around it. I shouted to Ramirez, "Cover me! Bring the K9 in!" But only static answered. The flashlights synchronized, cut out in a sudden blackout. Darkness pressed in like a living thing. Luna barked once far behind me, echoing through the reeds. Then a single beam snapped back on, directed at me, hole punched through the black. I shielded my eyes. When I dared to look again, the figure had moved closer, only a few feet away. I could see its outline, head cocked slightly as if curious. It made no sound, but I felt its gaze pry into my bones. The pager in my pocket buzzed violently. My hand shot to it. The screen lit with a single word: now. Beneath that, in red smear font, another message: join us. My pulse thundered. Had the pager guided me here? Was it their tool? I pressed it shut, heart slamming. The recorder clicked on, fate accepting its final charge. Then the figure raised its free hand and beckoned. A delicate movement, unnatural in its deliberation. I froze. Go forward or run. The mist curled around its ankles, wrapping it in a silken cloak of night. I took a step back, felt the recorder slip out of my hand. It clattered into the pit, landing with a dull thud on the replica's chest. The bead of candlelight, or was it from some hidden lantern, flickered, and in its glow the mannequin's eyelids fluttered, revealing a pair of lifeless glass eyes staring blankly at me. The figure tilted its head, and for a moment I thought it would speak. Instead, it turned slowly, gliding toward the trench's far lip. I jumped back as a chorus of soft giggles erupted from the darkness around us. A crowd of unseen children, their voices echoing in chorus. Something rustled behind the figure, a swarm of shapes in the fog moving closer. One by one, tiny silhouettes emerged. They stood at the trench's edge, pale forms too slender, too long-limbed, each wearing the same yellow raincoat and red boots, each clutching a battered toy. Their faces were blank masks of mud and sorrow. Luna's barks joined the giggling, and Ramirez's light cut through the fog, a distant beacon. But he made no move to cross the clearing. He'd stopped at the marsh's rim, eyes fixed. I swallowed, realizing the truth. I had led them here. Each clue, each step, each item of evidence had been part of a summons. They had drawn me into their cathedral of wet stone, into the heart of the swamp where lost children lingered. I turned to run, but the ground shifted underfoot, an unseen hand, silt sliding into mud. My boot sank. I pitched forward, arms flailing. I landed at the trench's edge, face inches from the mannequin's. Its glass eyes opened fully, pupils dilating, and it reached a crooked finger toward me. Luna's snarls crescendoed. Ramirez shouted something I couldn't hear. The circle of childlike forms advanced, silent except for the drip of water off boots. The torchlight died entirely. No beams, no moon, only suffocating black. In that abyss, I felt a breath against my neck, cold, dry. A whisper in my ear, softer than fog. Stay forever. I twisted to escape, but hands, pale, insubstantial, snaked around my wrists. The children closed in, their breaths cold as grave air. I felt their grip, gentle yet unrelenting, pulling me toward the pit. My vision narrowed to the red boot at the mannequin's side, to the recorder's blinking light inches from my face. Then the tape snapped. Breakfast was cold by the time I staggered back into the station, mud-slick boots leaving prints down the corridor. The hazmat team had arrived, biohazard suits, metal detectors, more flashlights, yet none dared follow me past the evidence locker's threshold. Even they paused at the edge of the video console's yellow crime scene tape. Do not cross. Ramirez met me at the locker door, uniform stained with muck, eyes hollow. He nodded toward my recorder, still pinned to the corkboard above the benches. Its red light blinked steadily, as if impatient to finish its story. I peeled back the plastic coating, silenced the tape, and pressed stop. The whir of the mechanism faded. replaced by the faint hum of the station's fluorescent bulbs. We stood in silence for a long moment, staring at the evidence laid out on the table. The yellow raincoat, faded and dripping. The single red boot, scuffed and warped. The cracked pager, its screen blank once more, and the handheld console packed away in its secure case. Around us, the station carried on, phones ringing, officers walking past, but the world we knew had ended in that swamp. Ramirez cleared his throat. "So, what now?" His voice cracked, betraying exhaustion. I slid the recorder into my jacket pocket. "We filed the report," I said quietly. "The van on A1A with no plates, the severed hand in the front seat. The trailer search. Nothing found except the altar. The marathon of clues leading to the Marsh Shrine." I paused, swallowing. We turn over every piece of evidence to the cold case unit. We keep the media at bay. And we wait. He shifted, glancing at the raincoat. "But what about them?" I sighed, sliding the raincoat into an evidence bag. "Cataloged as unknown subject. We'll label the trailer as a suspicious structure. The items, unclaimed personal property. The handprint, no match. We call it a prank or cult activity gone too far. We write it all off." He shook his head. "That's not what happened." I pressed my lips together. "I know." Then I opened the locker door and dropped in the pager. "We bury it." By noon, the station's focus had shifted back to routine. Parking summons, petty thefts, the mayor's traffic escort. A new shift briefing buzzed overhead, talk of heat indexes and 5-alarm fires downtown. I sat at my desk, the recorder's case beside me, humming softly. I knew what it held. 7 hours of static, laughter, half-whispered names, the sound of my own pulse racing. I knew the tape would reveal nothing but the uncanny. No voices but mine, no footsteps but my own. No proof of anything beyond me and the marsh. I glanced at the badge on the wall. Silver, tarnished, 8 years of earned stripes. I traced the engraved number with my finger. It felt distant, like someone else's life. I picked up the phone and dialed Internal Affairs. "Detective Wade," I said when they answered. "I'm requesting a transfer." That afternoon, I packed a bag and drove south, leaving the station behind. Ramirez dropped me off at the marina, engine still running. He climbed out and pressed a gloved hand to my shoulder. "You sure about this?" I nodded, eyes on the water. Sunlight sparkled across the bay, gulls cried overhead. The world felt mundane, yet I could still hear that whisper in my ear, soft as mist. "Stay forever." He swallowed. "If you need anything." I offered a tight smile. "You know where to find me." He looked away, gaze fixed on the docks, then held up a crumpled photograph. I recognized the image, 7 children. Yellow raincoats, red boots, faces blurred beyond recognition. I'd found that picture wedged in the trailer's makeshift altar. Ramirez lowered it gently into my hand. "Don't let it go," he whispered. I slid it into my shirt pocket and climbed into the boat. The engine roared, propeller churning the water as I pulled away from the dock. Ramirez watched until the hull cut him from view. Then he turned, shoulders slumped, and walked back toward the hazmat tents. I anchored a mile offshore, far beyond any marshland. The wind pulled at my hair, and I held the recorder against the cabin wall, a red light still blinking. I pressed play. Static at first, then the faint rustle of grass, my boot step, a distant whimper, then nothing but the hiss of rain. I rewound and played it again. Nothing. Either no sound was recorded, or the tape had been corrupted. I sat back, heart heavy, and realized the truth. The only record of what happened lay in my memory. No audio proof, no video files, no official confirmation. Just me, Detective Marcus Wade, left with a tape that captured nothing but silence. I pressed stop and set the recorder on the bunk. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, and felt the boat gently rock me. Out of the tiny port light, I could see the lights of Miami flickering in the distance, a world unaware of the children in yellow raincoats or the faceless figure in the marsh. That night, I dreamed of sawgrass brushing against my face, of tiny hands pressing into my palms, dragging me down beneath dark water. I woke to the recorder's red light blinking, though I hadn't pressed play. I sat up and saw the silhouette of the recorder moving, sliding across the bunk toward me, as if guided by unseen fingers. My breath caught. I reached out, heart pounding, but the recorder stopped at the edge of my reach and fell silent. The light went out. In the darkness, I heard it again, a giggle, soft and distant, followed by a whisper I couldn't place. "Find us." I closed my eyes, knowing the request was not a plea but an order, because they left me everything: footprints, a pager, a shrine, a tape of silence, so that someday I would come looking. I can feel my eyelids burning, but there's no shutting this down. The recorder's light glares back at me, pulse steady. 2 hours, 17 minutes, and climbing. Rain's pounding so hard now, I swear the window might give way. I'm supposed to be off duty 2 hours ago, but you know how it goes. You hear a call you shouldn't, or you see something you can't unsee, and suddenly you're back in the car, headlights carving through the dark, rubber burning on wet asphalt. It started on that curve of US 41, where the road cuts through the Everglades like a knife. That night, I was heading north back to the station, just me and the glow of marker posts ahead, when the scanner lit up. Priority call, 10:54, at mile marker 53, possible deceased subject. The words cracked over the air, rushed and clipped, textbook. But there was a hesitation in the dispatcher's voice I couldn't ignore. I flipped the siren switch, tires skidding as I dropped 2 gears and tore off down the 2-lane blacktop. By the time I arrived, the scene was already taped off. Officer Ruiz was crouched beside a sedan half submerged in shoulder-high water, rain dripping off her cap rim. She stood when she saw me, voice low. No driver. No skid marks. Nothing in the car but a blood trail from the driver's door inside. Her flashlight beam stretched back into the swamp, landing on broken reeds, stained brown. We exchanged a look, you know the one, where we both knew this wasn't going to be an open and shut. Ruiz and I climbed out, wading into knee-deep muck. Somewhere ahead, the patrol dogs were barking, crunching through the underbrush. My boots sucked at the mire, each step calling up swamp mud. I swept the beam along the water's surface. Nothing but reflections of red and blue. At the far edge of the tape, there was a glint, a body face down. We reached him together. Rookie Lane, just back from field training. His uniform soaked, chest pressed into the mud as if the earth itself was holding him down. No radio on his belt, no weapon. Just that single half-moon dent in his forehead. I knelt and checked for a pulse before I realized it was futile. The rain came down harder, washing his face away before I could even see his eyes. I stood, stomach twisting, and heard the faint crack of a branch behind us. I spun, heart drumming, but there was nobody, just drifting spray on the low-hanging cypress boughs. I could still smell the metal tang of blood and diesel leaking from the cruiser. No footprints other than our own. Nothing to connect this to anything except the black water that had claimed him. They ruled it homicide, but nobody had a motive. No gang tags, no missing persons report matching the vehicle. Nothing. I went home that morning smelling like decay, Showered twice, still woke up tasting swamp mud. I tried to shove it down, bills, reports, sleep study referrals, trustee assignments, but Lane's face kept coming back. How old was he? 23? 24? Fresh as they come. I'd been doing this 20 years, thought I had seen it all, but that, finding a fellow officer in the swamp, felt wrong in ways nightmares can't prepare you for. 3 nights later, Miami Edgewater. A domestic dispute call that went dead silent. I arrived at the high-rise, rain-slick sidewalk underfoot, neon signs dancing on the wet pavement. The door to 16B was cracked, hallway carpet soaked. I remember thinking how strange it was to see family portraits on the wall rails. Smiling kids, Christmas mornings, faded like old postcards. Then I heard it. Static from the hallway phone jiggling in its cradle. Dial tone, no dialed number, just the hum. Inside the apartment, furniture overturned, glass glittering like oil slicks across the tile floor. Blood drips from the ceiling above the kitchen sink. I drew my sidearm, moved in, checking corners like second nature. At the bathroom door, Ruiz's voice crackled. Bravo unit requesting entry. Code 4 if clear. I wrenched the door, and there he was, a man kneeling in a blood-filled tub, his head bowed, back slick with crimson. He didn't look up. The water lapped at the sides, carrying hair and skin flecks. I called his name, no response. I yanked him out, but it was too late. He was gone hours before. The coroner later told us the victim upstairs had been dead at least 8 hours. No sign of forced entry, no note, just a locked door and contractions of panic. That call still echoes when I'm halfway to sleep. Water dripping, drowning, the silent confession of a man who'd let himself die rather than let anyone find him. Then there was Highway 27 at Sebring, a midnight gas station run. No storm that night, just the steel-cold wind rattling the sign for Clyde's 24/7. I pulled in for coffee, saw an empty cruiser idling by the pumps. Keys in the ignition, engine warm. The door was locked. I ran around it, gun out, flashlight sweeping inside. No one there. But on the floorboard lay a child's toy, a small plastic duck, its squeaker punctured, stained with dead insect shells. Station video was offline. No camera, no footage. The toy squeaked when I squeezed it. An ominous bleat in the still air. My reflection in the window looked back at me, pale. I left my own gloves stuck to the dash, unable to process leaving Lane's, and now this broken plaything as evidence. I logged the scene, stared at the duck until my vision blurred. That squeak haunted me all the way home, even though the duck stayed behind, little and discarded. Every one of these scenes feels unconnected, except in the emptiness they leave, and I can't make sense of them. So tonight I'm talking through it. No annotations, no official recitations, just the memory of static whispers on a tape, frog calls in the dark, a deputy whose eyes were still open when we found him, and the weight of rain-soaked nights. The siren's voice came closer, wailing through the rain like a lost thing. Yet, when I flicked on my overhead light, it was a civilian sedan parked behind me. No badges, no bars, just the dull sheen of wet paint. I killed the siren, eased out of the driver's seat, and squinted into the downpour. Water pooled in the gutter at my feet as thunder rolled overhead. The car's windows were fogged. I couldn't see inside. I circled it, hand hovering near my holster. The license plate matched nothing in my memory. Old Florida tags faded. I tried the front door handle, locked, rear, locked, no movement inside. My breath hitched when I saw a smear of something on the passenger window, vertical streaks, as if fingers had slid down in panic. I pressed my glove against the glass. It was warm. I cocked my head, listening. Nothing but rain and the distant hiss of traffic. I went back to my cruiser and called it in. "Dispatch, this is Hale. I've got a suspicious vehicle, old tags, passenger side windows smeared. No occupants visible. Could be nothing, but I want K9 and backup. 1097 until they get here." The crackle came back. "Copy that, Hale. Units en route. ETA 2 mics." 2 minutes felt like 2 hours. I tapped the hood, rain pattering against steel. My recorder, perched on the dash, blinked patiently. I wanted to pull it inside, but I couldn't look away from that car. A bead of rain trickled over my glove, splashing the pavement. I glanced at the rearview mirror, my eyes, bloodshot, reflected back, haunted. Then movement. A jolt of dread. The backseat headrest shifted, as if someone had just leaned forward, and for an instant I thought I saw a flash of pale hair. I yanked the light switch, bathing the scene in white. Nothing. The headrest sat empty. I dropped to one knee, leveled my light down the side window and saw it. A face pressed against the glass, pale and streaked with tears and dirt. Mouth opening, closing, no sound. I jumped back, heart slamming. My radio erupted. "Unit at 53, can you confirm activity?" Officer Ruiz's voice, clipped, concrete. "Subject inside vehicle, unresponsive, no ID," I managed, voice rough. "Copy. Advise when you make contact." I approached, holster drawn, light tremoring in my hand. Every instinct screamed to keep distance, to wait for backup, but I couldn't step away. I had to know who it was. At the driver's side window, I dropped to one knee again, peered in. No keys, no blood, but the smell, damp hair, unwashed, faintly chemical, filled my nostrils. I tapped. The face vanished. Only my reflection remained, mouth open, teeth clenched. I rose and circled toward the back door, flashlight cutting a path through the night. Each step sank into a puddle, sending ripples outward. The tinny echo of my boots sounded uncomfortably loud. I set my cheek against the glass and whispered, "Hey, are you okay?" Nothing. Instinct told me to punch the lock, reach in, drag them out. But I hesitated, some primal caution, mind screaming that if I broke this open, I might release something that didn't belong on this earth. But it was a person. At least that's what my gut said. I rose, drew a breath, and raised my shoulder. Impact jarred my chest, pain blossoming, but the lock stayed intact. I stepped back, evaluating, breathing through the ache. A voice behind me, low, familiar. "Need a hand, detective?" I spun. Ruiz stood under my cruiser's spotlight, eyes sharp. "We're cleared to breach." I nodded, baring my teeth against the rain. She produced a Slim Jim from her coat. 11 years on the force taught her every trick. In 2 quick moves, the door squealed open. Rain flooded in, carrying with it the chill of swamp water. I kicked inside, flashlight sweeping. Empty, no seat. Dash was gaping whole. The floor mats were gone. Cleaned out like someone ripped the guts out. My light landed on the backseat floor. 2 pink baby socks caked with mud. I flicked to my radio. Subject gone, vehicle stripped, found baby socks. Dispatch's pause stretched. K9 units divert to your location. Affirmative. We stood in the rain, Ruiz and I, the world blurred by downpour. I bent to scoop up one sock, rubbed it between my fingers. Tiny, abandoned. I tucked it into evidence pouch. The fog in the memory dissolved, replaced by a nameless dread, like I'd walked through a veil and come out the other side, unaltered and irrevocably changed. Back at the station, I sat in the interrogation room, lights buzzing overhead, staring at the empty evidence tray. The sock lay under a clear sheet. I reached out, thumb brushing the fabric. It should have belonged to a baby no more than a year old. I tried to recall any missing child cases in that area. Nothing recent. My mind rifled through names, dates, bulletin boards, but the sock remained an orphan. That night, I dreamt of footsteps in ankle-deep water, reaching out to me. No face attached, just a small hand, palm sticky with mud. I woke choking, sweat-soaked, to the smell of rain seeped beneath my window sill. The recorder lay on my nightstand, blinking. I hit play, static, then a whisper, "Don't leave me." The words were slurred, as if the tape had soaked in water. My blood ran cold. I spun on the recorder. That's not my voice. I froze, listening. "Detective, help me." I ripped the tape from the recorder and flung it across the room. It hit the far wall, clattered to the floor. Silence returned, save for the rain. I sat in the dark for what felt like hours, mind pacing through possibilities. Broken wiring, misaligned heads, ghost in the machine. But none of it mattered. The voice was unmistakable. Now, here I am, at my desk. The sock tucked in my coat pocket. I'm shaking, trying to piece together a case that's got so many loose ends I could hang myself with them. A fellow officer in the brush. A man drowned in his own bathroom. A child's toy in a deserted cruiser. That word on the tape. And now this. Baby socks in the swamp. A voice begging me to stay. I don't know who's left these signs, but they're pointing at something I can't explain. And every night the rain comes down like a reminder. Water conceals as much as it reveals. I'm running out of time. I can feel it in the ache behind my eyes, in the tremor of my hands. Something's coming through that rain, from the water, from whatever shadows we never see. And until I find out what it is, I'll keep talking, keep recording, hoping that by laying it all bare, I can make sense of this before it makes me the next victim. Rain's picked up again. The tape in the wall clicks, but there's no whisper this time, only the steady drum and the echo of a man who can't let go. I pushed back from the interview room's fluorescent glare and staggered toward my cruiser, mind flooded with shapes and half-heard whispers. The rain had eased into a fine mist, coating my shoulders like sweat. I cranked the heater on full blast, peeled off my soaked jacket, and draped it across the passenger seat. The baby sock lay on the center console, a mute testament to something, or someone, lost out there. I wanted to leave it, pin it to a board in the briefing room, spark a department-wide search. But I couldn't trust anyone else with this, not yet. Too many questions without answers. On the drive back toward the swamp road where Lane's body was found, I passed the same high grass and tangled cypress knees, headlights cutting narrow beams through the fog. My scanner was dead quiet. No pulse, no traffic. Nothing but the hum of the engine and the rhythmic swish of tires on pavement. Somewhere in my chest, the ache for certainty tightened like a noose. I flipped on the recorder again, habit, confession, coping mechanism. "I'm heading back out," I muttered to the blinking red light. "Going to look for anything that ties these scenes together." I turned off the main road onto the unlit gravel that led deep into the Everglades. The air smelled of peat and decay, even when it wasn't raining. The gravel crunched under my tires until I reached the parking spot by the old landing dock. The tape deck in my cruiser ate a fresh microcassette with a hiss. I snapped on my flashlight and stepped into the wet grass, each step sinking with a soft grunt. I followed the muddy trail toward where the dogs had barked 2 nights ago. The air was thick, humid, heavy, like breathing through a blanket. I paused at the spot where Lane's cruiser had slid into the water. The mud there was churned and slick, faint tire ruts disappearing into the dark. I ran my glove over the ground. No prints other than my own. But I noticed something else. Faint depressions, circular, as if someone had dropped a small bucket or basin there. I knelt, brushing away detritus until the outline formed, a small plastic ring, half buried. I pried it out, another toy, this time the top of a stacking cup. Faded yellow plastic, rim jagged as if bitten. I slipped it into my pocket and moved upriver, further into the reeds. My flashlight beam bounced off dripping vines and the swollen trunks of bald cypresses. Somewhere ahead, water rippled, maybe fish, maybe something larger. My skin prickled with trepidation. I thought of that muffled voice on the tape. "Detective, help me." Who spoke that? Lane? The woman in the motel? A child? I shook my head, trying to clear the static from my thoughts. A faint glimmer caught my eye, reflective tape, fresh. I coughed, lunging forward. There on the bank lay a life vest, soaked through, sand and mud clinging to the straps. No label, no name. It could belong to any boat operator, any stranded boater. Yet here it was, left on the grass as if dropped in haste. I shone my light across the water, nothing but roiling blackness. I knelt and closed my fingers around the vest's collar. The material felt oddly warm, like it had recently been in the water. My radio snapped alive. "Unit 12, dispatch. You copy?" "Go ahead," I said, voice hollow. "Command wants your location. Status update." I hesitated, thumb hovering over the mic. I wasn't sure I could explain what I'd found without sounding unhinged. "I'm at the Everglades landing dock off US 41. Checking old scene. Found some items. Copy. Return to station when done. ETA 10 minutes. I cut the radio and pressed on. Deeper into the ghostly swamp, the only path the beam of my light. Fallen logs lay across the waterway. Vines like serpents draped over every branch. I stumbled once, catching myself before I fell in. My breath came in short bursts. I kept thinking of the mixtape of scenes spinning in my head. The rookie in the mud, the dying man in the tub, the cruiser with toys, the abandoned motel rooms, and how each screamed of someone trying to tell me something. Up ahead I heard it, a splash, low and sudden, just beyond where I stood. My pulse spiked. I swung the flashlight, landing on the water's surface, then onto the bank. Empty. But where the mud met the water was a single set of footprints, far larger than mine, diverging from the cruiser's trail and heading into the reeds. I stared, transfixed, the beam wobbling. The prints faded after a few steps, swallowed by the water. I took a breath, knelt, and pressed my gloved fingers into the print, size about 13, straight-arched, no ridges to identify. A voice in my head, "This is it." I stood and scanned the trees. The only movement was the rain dripping from leaves. I called out, voice echoing, "Hey, if someone's here, show yourself." No answer. A chill ran down my spine. I reached for my radio, but the screen was blank, dead. My comms? Cut out. I tried the siren, electric relay whine, then silence. Only the rain, persistent, insistent. I patted my pockets, flashlight, tape recorder, notebook, gloves, 2 pieces of plastic toys, a sock, and that life vest. Enough clues to fill a dump truck, but no context. I shifted, and my boot hit something solid. I knelt, shining light on the object. A small, embossed tin box, its lid ajar. I pried it open. Inside, wrapped in stained fabric, were 4 Polaroid photos. My heart pounded as I pulled them out one by one. The first, a family, mother, father, and toddler, smiling on a boat deck, sun beating down. The second, the same family on picnic blankets at a roadside pull-off, rain coming down, father holding an umbrella over the child. The third, the father alone, cradling the toddler in his arms as she slept, her sockless foot hanging limp. The last, a close-up of a small handprint pressed into mud. identical to the ones I'd found on sedan windows. My breath caught. The faces were familiar, somewhere in the recesses of memory. I turned the pictures over looking for notes. Only one had scrawled text. "Help us. Don't let them see us die." No date, no location. A sudden crack behind me jolted me upright. I swung the flashlight through the trees. Lightning flickered, revealing a figure standing in the distance. Tall, hunched, wearing something that looked like a soaked jacket. My pulse hammered. I raised my voice. "Hey, show yourself." The figure didn't move, only watched. I took a slow step back, boots sinking in mire, grabbed my recorder and shakily pressed play, hoping to capture anything unusual. The tape whirred, then static, then soft, distant sobbing. I cleared my throat. "I'm here to help," I called. "Tell me what you need." The figure tilted its head. The rain fell harder, masking any other sound. Then, without a word, it turned and slid between the trees, disappearing. I stood frozen, chest heaving, as the rain erased its footprints. I clicked off the recorder, jammed the photos into my pocket, and trudged back to my cruiser, mind racing faster than my feet. As soon as I was seated, I hit the siren button again. Nothing. I tried the ignition. Engine turned over, lights bright, but radios silent, siren mute. The only proof of what I'd found were the Polaroids and toys nestled in my pockets. I peeled the sock from the console and pressed it into the tin box, a makeshift evidence kit. My hands trembled as I taped it shut. My reflection in the windshield looked as broken as I felt. I drove back to town without radio, without siren, hands gripping the wheel. The mist clung to the road, headlights cutting through in narrow slices. I kept half expecting those footprints to appear behind me, following. By the time I reached the station, the first rays of dawn were bleeding through clouds. I parked under the portico, stepped out, and headed straight for the evidence locker. Inside a sealed, numbered bag went the tin box and the 2 toys and the vest, everything. In the break room, I sank into a stained vinyl chair, tossed the recorder onto the table, and stared at it. It held hours of my confession, my unraveling. I thought of Lane's face in the mud, of that man in the tub, of the cruiser and the motel, and now this scavenger hunt of fragments that led me through the swamp. I pressed record again. My voice came out quiet, cracked but clear. "This is Section 3. I don't know what's happening, but I'm going deeper. I'm going to find whoever that figure was, whoever those people in the photos were, and what happened to them. Because if I don't, they'll keep leaving pieces of themselves for me to find. And next time, it might not be a sock or a toy. It might be something I can't survive." I stopped the tape and sat in silence, feeling the weight of every case I'd ever taken, every truth I'd ever told, crushing down. Outside, the rain finally ceased, leaving only the distant call of swamp birds and a sky that threatened to clear. I rose, grabbed my gear, and walked toward the armory. 7 sections to go, and somewhere out there the answers were waiting, buried in mud, hidden in photos, whispered on tapes. And I'd chase them to the ends of the earth if I have to. I sat at my desk long after the station emptied, the glow from my computer screen painting my face sickly green. The Polaroids lay spread before me. One of the family on the boat deck, the toddler smiling in sunshine. Another of the victim in the tub, eyes closed like she'd drifted off rather than bled out. The muddy handprint. The picnic scene in the rain. I stared until my vision blurred. Somewhere between those images was a story I couldn't piece together. A thread linking that father, that daughter, the swamp, the cruiser, the motel room, and the vest, and the toys, and Lane. I pulled my chair toward the evidence locker and opened the sealed bag containing the tin box, the duck toy, the stacking cup rim, the sock, the life vest. I picked up the cup rim and turned it in my hand. It felt hollow, brittle. If those items were breadcrumbs, where did they lead? I decided to revisit the father in the photos. He had a name, I just hadn't found it yet. I ran a search on missing persons for any toddler in Dade County matching the pic's date stamp, or at least time frame. Nothing. I expanded my search statewide. Still nothing. The toddler's face in the photo was achingly familiar, like looking at an old memory I'd forgotten. An hour later, I was on my phone with the Florida Department of Children and Families. The clerk told me they had no active cases matching a missing toddler from the past 2 years in that region. I noted every denial, every blank stare, feeling the walls close in. I hung up and dialed Miami PD Homicide. Asked if any local families reported a missing child. No. I transferred to Edgewater Precinct. They checked again. No. Back to Homicide. No runs. The trail fizzled at the first spark. I drove out to the marina the next morning, Circuit Lakes Marina off Highway 27, the same place the family photo had been taken, I guessed. A circle of docks, boats bobbing in half-frozen dawn light. I paid the attendant $5 for an old surveillance tape from that pier's security camera. It took 2 hours to track it down. The old tapes get archived off-site. He handed over a dusty VHS labeled Doc A4, June 23, 2024. I thanked him, climbed back into my cruiser, and slid the tape into a portable player I'd smuggled out of evidence months ago. The grainy footage flickered to life. A late afternoon sun. Families milling about. A man holding a child. The toddler's sockless foot dangling. I rewound and froze the frame. The same child from the photo. I recognized the man's jacket. Dark canvas, the same as the vest I'd found, but no identifying patches. The woman, her hair in a ponytail, stood beside them smiling. They lingered by the railing, watched the water. Then the camera angle shifted. I saw the back of a worker's cap, light blue denim, stamped Cliffs Marine. I noted it, Cliffs Marine. I hit fast forward. The family boarded a small bowrider, engine idling. The toddler waved, then clasped something, a doll, maybe, in her tiny fist. The boat pulled away, motor coughing. Something dark floated past the hull, something long. I froze again. The object drifted alongside the boat for a moment, then sank. Was that a body? No, too slender. A log, number too smooth. I paused the tape and zoomed. A human arm. But flesh was a sick, plant-like green, mottled. I threw the player across the seat. It skidded with a ringing crack. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd pass out. I tapped into CAD records and called the phone number for Cliffs Marine. Got an answering machine. I left a message. Detective Hale, Miami County PD, call me back about boating footage. Urgent. No answer by afternoon. I drove out to the docks. The office was locked, sign on the door. Closed for maintenance. A rusty padlock held fast. I circled the building, flashlight in hand, and peered through windows. The floor was swept clean, except for one dusty spot at the back, a set of footprints leading to a filing cabinet. I traced the prints, size 13 boots, smooth soles. I pressed my palm to the glass. They didn't match mine. I jiggled the lock. It held. I sighed, drank the rain off my face, and left a note under the door. Detective Marcus Hale, call me. I scribbled my number and tucked it behind the latch. As I walked back to my car, I felt eyes on me, like someone was watching from the corner of the lot. I spun around. Empty. Just the tall reeds swaying. A single egret landing on a piling. That night, I went to the motel where the tape had been found. Seaview, room 12. The door was barricaded from the inside now, police tape fluttering. I peeled it off and slipped inside. The carpet squished underfoot. The bed was neatly made, sheets crisp, nothing like the storm of wet clothes and suitcase I'd seen. I shined my light under the bed. No recorder, no footprints. Only one thing, a single Polaroid on the pillow, face down. I flipped it, the toddler. Her face twisted in fear, eyes wide. On the back, "Don't trust him," in shaky handwriting. I swallowed. I stumbled back to my cruiser, slipped the photo into my jacket pocket and pressed record on my notebook. My pen trembled as I wrote, Section 5. I'm chasing a family that may not exist on paper. I've seen them on tape, in photos, on motel pillows. A child who vanished from the dock, a dark shape trailing their boat, a voice whispering through static, "Don't trust him." Now, a warning scrawled on a Polaroid. Who is this family? Who betrayed them? And what am I risking by following their trail? I looked up, saw my reflection in the window, haunted, hollow-eyed. The recorder's light blinked, waiting. I pressed stop. That Polaroid burned in my pocket. I knew one thing, I couldn't stop now. But as I sat in the dark, I felt a presence at my shoulder. No movement, no breath, just the weight of watching. I turned, heart in my throat. Nothing but my own shadow stretching down the corridor. I couldn't sleep. My eyes stung, and even though the station's walls were silent at 3:47 a.m., my mind buzzed with fragments of that family. Smiling on the dock, terror in that final Polaroid, the child's whispered pleas. I sat in my cruiser parked behind Cliffs Marine, heart drumming so loud I was certain anyone inside would hear it. I'd screwed up the lock yesterday, left my calling card under the door. Today, I'd do it properly. I grabbed my Slim Jim, flashlight, and tape recorder from the passenger seat. Rain had returned. Fine mist coating everything in a sheen. I crept around the building's perimeter, boots silent on the damp asphalt. The main office door faced north. The padlock looked sturdier than before. I pressed the gym into the door gap, felt for the latch, and wiggled until it clicked. The lock sprang open with a metallic twitch. My pulse thundered as I eased the door inward, careful to keep noise to a minimum. The interior lights were off. The air smelled of engine oil and stale coffee. My flashlight beam landed on a row of filing cabinets against the far wall. Desk chairs pushed under empty desks. A single wall clock ticking away the seconds. I stepped lightly, boots echoing softly on concrete. My eyes darted to the security monitor station. 2 blank screens and 1 blinking red light. I knelt to check it. A DVR box with a blinking amber LED, meaning it had lost power but continued recording to drive. If I could yank the plug from the back, it would revert to battery, and maybe I could extract the footage. I flipped on my recorder, whispered, Section 6. Cliffs Marine break-in. Attempt to recover DVR. Then I switched it off. I needed my full attention. I crouched, reached behind the monitor and found the power cable. I tugged it free. The DVR clicked, and the red LED shifted to steady green. I pulled my phone from my pocket, configured with a USB OTG cable and a discrete forensic grab utility, and connected it to the DVR's USB port. The device whirred quietly, and after a moment my phone screen lit. I scanned the directory listing. One by one, I tapped to download. The DVR's battery was limited. I could only grab a few files before it died. I prioritized Sedan 53 and Room 12, knowing they were crucial. A progress bar crawled across my screen. I wiped sweat from my brow. Only the hum of rain drumming on the tin roof overhead. Download complete. I yanked the phone from its port and stashed it in my jacket, then fought the urge to peek at the file names again. My light swept the room, nothing else of obvious interest. I moved toward the filing cabinets, remembering those dusty footprints on the floor. If someone had rifled through reports, there might be physical evidence left behind. I knelt at the first cabinet, undid the latch, and pulled open the top drawer. Inside, printed marine license applications, inventory manifests, maintenance logs. I rifled through until I saw a ring-bound notebook stamped Employee Log, Cliffs Marine. I flipped through pages filled with names, dates, tasks performed. At first glance, it was routine: oil changes, trailer hitch repairs, bilge pump installs. Then I found entries from early August. August 5th, 2024, Johnson, baby life vest replacement, customer complaint, 08/06, Lane, patrol cruiser pit test, returned no defects. August 10th, Smith, installed new hatch cover. My finger froze on Lane, patrol cruiser PIT test. Lane was listed here, as if Cliffs had serviced that cruiser before it ended up in the swamp. Why had I never linked the two? And what about that baby life vest? There was a cluster of entries around the same date. Children's equipment serviced, life vests issued, doll replacements. Odd for a marine shop, unless they catered to families taking toddlers on boats. I snapped a photo of the notebook page with my phone, then snapped off the cabinet. As I straightened, I heard it. A soft scuff behind me, impossible to ignore in the silence. My stomach clenched. I swept my light toward the door, nothing but my own trembling beam. I twisted. Thought I saw movement at the edge of the screen, my own shadow or someone else. I took a deep breath. I'm law enforcement. I whispered into the recorder's mic. If anyone's here, come out with your hands up. Silence. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging, or you'll be next. No area code. I shivered. Whoever had left it was in the building or watching outside. I clicked the text open, then locked the phone. I pressed my back against the cabinets, heart pounding, mind racing. I needed to leave, and fast. But I couldn't walk out the way I came. It would be too obvious. I considered climbing out the front window, but it was barred. The emergency exit door was around the corner, but I'd have to cross open space. I toggled off my flashlight and listened. Footsteps. Light, measured, coming down the hallway toward me. I felt for my gun, found it, and flicked the safety off. My recorder was in my other hand, light still blinking. I crept to the door and cracked it open enough to see the corridor. The dim glow of a street lamp filtered through a frosted glass panel at the far end. No figure, but I heard a soft breath, almost a whisper. I edged back inside, closing the door quietly. I counted steps to the far wall, then pressed my light against it. There, a locked door labeled Storage. I pulled the gym and tapped the latch. It gave way. I slipped inside, heart slamming, and ducked behind stacked boxes. The hallway light spilled in. I could see my own silhouette stretched across the floor. Footsteps drew nearer. I held my breath. The door creaked open. A figure stepped in. A man wearing a dark, hooded jacket, face hidden, hands gloved. He stopped mid-hall, scanned left and right. I flicked my light on, yelled, "Freeze! Miami County PD!" He paused, then bolted. I lunged out of the storage room, radioing, but my phone was useless here. No signal through thick walls. I chased him into the main office, stumbling over a desk chair, firing a warning shot into the ceiling. The reverberation cracked the silence like thunder. He skidded to a halt, then dove through the DVR room I'd just looted. I pursued. Gun trained on his back, but he was faster. He punched through a back door marked, "Employees only," then was gone. I slammed into the door, tried to follow, but it was locked from the other side. My flashlight beam shone through a small glass window. It was the alley behind the shop. A lone fog lamp flickered in the mist. I turned the handle. It wouldn't budge. I hammered on the glass and shouted, "Get down here!" No answer. I kicked the door, then saw footprints on the concrete beyond, size 13, matching the ones in the swamp. They led away into the darkness. I yanked the door again. The lock twisted, and the door popped open. The figure must have unwittingly left it unlocked. I stormed out into the alley, boots splashing in a puddle. The night air hit me like ice. I shone my light across the corrugated metal walls. Nothing but discarded oil cans and a broken water heater. The footprints stopped in the weeds. I scanned upward, the roof edge, a ladder propped against a drain pipe. Second story. He disappeared upward. I clipped my radio to my shoulder and pressed transmit. "Dispatch, this is Hale. Suspect fled east through alley, heading north. Large male, dark jacket, approximated height 6'2". Request canine and air support." Static. Then nothing. My radio had discharged when I yanked the DVR cable. I cursed. No backup, no immediate help. I was alone in the mist. I pocketed my phone and sprinted to the ladder, grabbed the lowest rung, and hoisted myself up. The metal clanged under my weight. I reached the roof and stumbled forward, heart pounding. The building's HVAC units hummed overhead. I paused at the edge, heart racing, 3 stories to the ground. I shone my light across the rooftops, rusted vents, pigeon droppings, an open skylight leading back into the office. I eased toward it and peered in. The office floor below, desk lamps flickering, empty. Then something moved. A silhouette at the far window. He was pulling a tarp over the sill covering the glass from the inside. I raised my voice. "Last chance. Come out now." The silhouette froze, then withdrew into the room. I leapt across the gap, rolled, and landed in the office, flashlight sweeping. He'd gone. Again. My boots left wet prints on the carpet. I advanced slowly, gun ready. At the far wall, I spotted something. A map pinned to the corkboard, with strings of red thread connecting US 41 near the Everglades, the Edgewater apartment building, Highway 27 gas station, Seaview Motel, Circuit Lakes Marina, and now Cliffs Marine. Beneath each pin, a Polaroid tacked. Laying in the mud, the body in the tub, the duck toy, the baby sock, the stacking cup, the motel portrait, and finally that family photo. My blood ran cold. Someone had orchestrated all of this, mapped it, and left the trail for me. And they'd been here in my station, plotting while I chased puzzle pieces. I reached out, touched the thread. It vibrated under my fingers as if alive. A click behind me. I spun. He stood in the doorway, tall, hood fallen back, and I recognized the face. It was Sergeant Thompson. His uniform shirt was tucked neatly, badge gleaming. His eyes were cold. "Detective Hale," he said, voice low. "You've done well following the breadcrumbs." My heart hammered. "You... why?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Because you're the one I need to finish the job, and you've proven you can handle it." I raised my gun. "You're under arrest." He shook his head. "No, Marcus, you're exactly where you belong." He stepped forward, hands empty, calm. Outside, rain began falling hard again, rattling the rooftop. I glanced at the map, pins and photos connecting the missing girl, the deaths, the toys, a map to vengeance. Sergeant Thompson tilted his head. "This ends tonight. You either join me or become one of the pins." I swallowed, chest tight. My mind raced. There was no backup. There was no escape. and if I refused, he'd drown me in the swamp and pin me next to Lane. I braced myself, finger on the trigger, ready for the choice that would define me. I didn't hesitate. My fingers squeezed the trigger guard, every muscle screaming to end this. Thompson's lips curved into something like approval as he raised a hand, palm open, walking forward with that calm predator's confidence painters warn against in portraiture. I braced myself, thinking of Lane's hollowed eyes, the young suspect in the tub, the silent cruiser and its squeaky toy, every lost soul that had led me here. "Stay back," I hissed, shotgun voice rasped. "I'm done chasing shadows." He stopped 10 feet away, hands still empty. "Good," he said, "because this shadow needs illumination." He flicked a switch on his belt. Behind me, sirens tore at the quiet. K9, air support, half the county racing here. I felt relief flood me, then panic. Was that what Thompson intended? To lead them here, to show me off like a trophy? He stepped aside, gesturing at the corkboard. "Take a look." I spun toward the map. The red threads had multiplied. New pins marking my home, the precinct hall, my daughter's daycare. I froze. My daughter's daycare. Thompson's voice was ice. "Your little girl went missing 6 months ago. DCF said no active cases. Homicide said no footprints. You looked away, Marcus. You refused to admit her disappearance. Meanwhile, I was picking up clues. Little socks, toys, life vests, signs she'd wandered into the swamp one night. You were too busy writing reports, too busy trying to pretend she never left." I wheezed, heart stuttering. "What are you talking about?" He stepped closer, voice soft. "That toy duck? It was hers. That sock? Yours. I gathered them, pinned them to the board so you couldn't ignore the track. Every missing piece was you, Marcus. And now you finally see." All at once, the room tipped. I slumped against the desk, mind racing back. The baby sock I found, I'd assumed it belonged to another family. The toy duck, I thought it was a clue planted by someone else. I'd never connected them to my own nightmares. My daughter's face floated ahead of me. Hazel eyes, crooked grin, the way she called me Daddy in her sing-song voice. She was out there, alone, lost in the Everglades. Thompson crouched next to me. You ever wonder why DCF and homicide came up blank? Because I bought them off. Nobody wanted to help the detective who'd lost his daughter. I needed someone who understood the swamp, someone who would follow each fragment until we found her. Anger welded with guilt inside me. "You used me." He nodded. "I used us." He stood, back straight. "But you did the work. My people have been out there scouring the water. I'm a father too, Marcus. Mine went missing last year, fell off a charter boat. No government interest, just a cold case shoved aside. I decided no more. I'd create evidence, force law enforcement to chase ghosts until they stumbled on the truth." The building shuddered with the growl of arriving units. I forced myself up, shouldered my weapon. Enough. Thompson pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaling. "Go get your daughter." I backed toward the door, glancing at his holster. Empty. He'd disarmed himself. "Why should I trust you?" He let out a humorless chuckle. "You don't have a choice. I have associates posted on the marsh trails. If you try anything foolish, they'll disappear you, same as the others." He lifted a roll of photos from the board. More Polaroids. My daughter clutching a pale yellow cup, running toward a dock. Her bare feet tracked in mud. Rain-soaked strands of her hair plastered to her forehead. Each image was dated, time-stamped, geotagged to spots in the swamp I'd marked as "search unsuccessful." Blood pounded in my ears. I realized then that this was bigger than my department, bigger than the county. Some secret network operating in the wetlands. Fathers retrieving their daughters, using vigilante justice where law refused them. And I'd been complicit, guided by Thompson's clues, manipulated into mapping a conspiracy. The door crashed open. Blue uniforms flooded in, officers shouting commands, canine units barking, spotlights sweeping the room. Thompson raised his hands. "Don't move," he called. I lowered my weapon step by step, then lashed out with my elbow, striking Thompson's jaw. He staggered, surprised, as I spun and lunged, tackling him toward the desk. Pipers flew like birds. We crashed through evidence shelves, Thomas Hardy's ticket to the past landing on his head. I wrestled for control of his service pistol. We grappled, bodies slick with sweat and rainwater tracked in from my coat. An officer's flashlight beam cut through the darkness. "Detective Hale!" I froze, Thompson under me, my hand on his wrist. Sirens wailed closer, department brass shouting orders. I looked into Thompson's eyes. There was something pleading there, a break in the mask. "Help me," he whispered. I recoiled, ached, then let go. Backing away, I stood, chest heaving, as uniformed officers cuffed him. Thompson allowed it, closing his eyes in quiet relief. They pulled me aside. "You okay, Detective?" Ruiz knelt at my side, concern in her gaze. I nodded, numbly. They led Thompson out, past the map still cluttered with photos and threads. I watched them go, feeling hollow. He paused in the doorway, eyes meeting mine. Not hate, gratitude. Then he was gone, swallowed by the lights. My legs gave way and I sank to the floor beside the corkboard. Every thread a lifeline I'd clutched without realizing. I reached out and pulled down the Polaroid of my daughter's muddy footprints in the grass. Her name was Emma, 2 years old when she vanished. I tucked the photo in my breast pocket. Later that morning, I stood on the edge of the swamp where it all began. Drones hovered overhead, officers combed the reeds, boats drifted on black water. I saw the yellow life vest floating in the shallows, and the stacking cup rim half buried in mud. I waded in up to my knees, heart heavy but determined. I clicked on my recorder. "This is Section 7, Sergeant. Thompson's network is dismantled, but the swamp holds too many secrets to ever be fully known. Emma's out here somewhere, and so are the truths we've buried. I'll keep searching, following every whisper, every toy, every footprint, because what we don't seek we lose forever." I stepped deeper until the water reached my waist. Let the current swirl around me. The mud tugged at my boots. A breeze rustled through the cypress palms. Somewhere, a child's giggle echoed in my mind. I raised my gaze to the mist-shrouded horizon, and then I heard her voice, clear as the dawn. "Daddy, where are you?" I can still feel the weight of the keys under my fingertips, the hollow click each made as I unlocked the door to that house on A1A. The porch light was flickering. Once, twice, then steady, casting long, jittery shadows across the soaked wooden boards. I shook out my right sleeve, watched a bead of rain roll down my forearm before dripping off the cuff. Steve was on my left, flashlight trained on the dark shapes beyond the screen door. We didn't speak. We never did before stepping into something uncertain. Silence felt safer. When I pushed the door open, the scent of salt and mold washed over me, damp as if it had been breathing inside the walls. The kid's mother stood in the hallway, face drained of color, a dripping umbrella in her right hand. She swallowed hard, eyes flicking to the stairs. "He's up there," she said. "Please, he won't come down." Her voice was barely audible over the rain. My light traced the hallway, peeling paint. water stains trailing like tears, faded family photos hanging at crooked angles. I clicked the beam up the staircase, carpeting dark with moisture. Somewhere above, I heard a thump. My chest tightened, the kind of tightening that doesn't go away with a few deep breaths. Unit 5, I whispered into my radio mic, clipped to my vest. Static crackled back, distant voices unclear. Advise, possible juvenile welfare check. Steve circled around to the living room while I ascended. Each step creaked under my weight, the carpet bunching around my boots. At the top, I hesitated. The hallway stretched out like an empty tunnel, doors on either side, the last one at the end slightly ajar. Light spilled from beneath, making a thin line across the warped floorboards. The kid's voice, softer now, drifted through the crack. They're watching me. I approached, hand resting on my holster even though I knew nothing inside was armed. Fear didn't listen to logic. Heart hammered. I swallowed to clear my throat. "Adam," I said. Nothing but another thud and a low groan, like someone shifting position. I nudged the door with my shoulder. It swung open further, revealing a room half lit by the glow of the hallway lamp. Shadows danced across the far wall, motes of dust swirling in the beam of my flashlight. A single twin bed sat against the left wall, sheets in disarray, mattress soaked around the edges. Books and toys littered the floor. I caught sight of a plastic fire truck, wheels spinning slowly in a puddle of water. "Adam," I said again. My voice sounded too loud. Footsteps behind me. Steve, his rifle lowered but ready. He flicked on his own light, scanning the closet door I'd just passed. The molding around it was warped and bulging slightly, like it had absorbed too much water and decided to reshape itself. I set my light on the kid's desk, saw the open laptop with a paused video, static hiss, black screen. Next to it, a phone face up, endless missed calls glowing. I stooped to pick it up, screen cracked, but the home button still showed a blinking voicemail icon. I opened the app. 49 unheard messages, all from the same number. One new voicemail from 2 hours ago. I hit play, just heavy breathing. Then nothing but silence, followed by a metallic click. Another thump from the other side of the room, behind the closet door. Steve's head jerked in that direction. He tapped my shoulder, mouthed, "Closet." I nodded, holstered the phone, my glove brushing the grip of my weapon. We moved together, fluid motion from years of training. I extended my hand to the closet knob, felt the cool metal under my leather glove, and twisted. The door creaked open to reveal empty hangers swaying. Beneath them, scuffed shoes neatly lined. The back wall was uneven, drywall bulging inward slightly. A faint draft seeped through a crack at the base. I crouched, scanning with my flashlight, nothing but pipes and insulation. My breath caught when I saw faint scratch marks along the bottom edge, as if someone clawed from inside. Tiny fragments of whatever lay in the crawl space dusted the floor. Steve reached past me, touched the drywall with a fingertip. It shifted, easy, like paper. My hand shot up, ready to chip, but just then Steve pulled it back. "Don't," he breathed. He withdrew a small metal pry bar from his pocket, wedged it between the seam. Metal groaned. I felt my heart stutter. He pried carefully, inch by inch, until the panel swung open on rusty hinges. That inexplicable detail stuck in my mind. Hinges you didn't find on modern drywall. The space beyond was small. Darkness folded back into itself. The air was oddly warm, humid, like a living animal breathing. I flashed my light inside. Tangled wiring, lengths of rubber tubing coiled against the back wall, and then I saw it. A face pressed against the interior plaster, eyes wide, bone white, lips parted in a silent cry. I jerked back, breath catching in my throat. Steve cursed under his breath, trained his light back on the shape. 3 faces stacked one above the other, noses flattened, eyes gleaming like wet stones. Before we could react, the closet door slammed shut behind us, not with a crash but an abrupt click, like someone whispered, "Done." I slammed my shoulder into it, locked. My flashlight skittered across the floor, beam dancing over the bed frame legs. I saw Steve raise his rifle, hammering at the door with frantic shots. 2 muted pops that echoed hollowly. Then silence. No rustling behind the wall, no sound of metal hinges. Just the storm outside drumming on the roof. Adam's mother burst in, screaming, "Please, please, my baby's in there." Steve spun, his rifle swinging past me. I lunged for the door, pried at the latch. It gave way without resistance, swinging open just enough to let us see the inside. Emptiness. Bones splintering from some cheap construction. No faces, no wiring. Nothing that explained the weight, the warmth, the press of bodies against the plaster. Adam was gone. I found him in the front yard, curled in a muddy puddle beneath the porch. He stared at me with blank eyes, mouth opening and closing like a fish. I scooped him up, rain sliding down my neck, soaking the collar of my uniform. His clothes were torn, his skin smudged with dirt and something I couldn't place. He pointed behind me, whimpering, "They were here." I turned. The closet remained shut, the molding pressed flush. The front windows reflected our faces, rain-smeared and uncertain. I wanted to ask Steve if he saw it too, but he was already on his radio, calling for paramedics. I carried the kid to the porch, each step muffled by the storm's roar. That night, in the report, we claimed a runaway. A frightened child seeking escape. Standard procedure. No mention of the wall, the faces, the way the wood felt alive under my palm. No note about the shattered phone, the endless voicemails. Down at the station, they filed the report and moved on, pens scratching on clipboards. But I couldn't move on. Weeks later, I sat in my dry office, rain still throbbing against the window, and I found a scrap of drywall still stuck under my fingernail, thin, pale, like an eyelid. I dropped it into my desk drawer, beneath the false bottom of my personal lockbox. Sometimes, when the storm's heavy, I open the drawer and hold it up to the light. In that translucent bit, I see the imprint of something. Curved ridges, like the cradle of a skull. And every time, I hear the softest whisper, just on the edge of hearing, "Detective, come back." I settle back into my chair, bruised and wet, the storm's final echoes fading into a soft drip from the ceiling tiles. The rest of the night blurs. The paramedics' faces, the mother's relieved sobs, Steve collapsing against the desk in the break room, head in his hands. We file the runaway report before dawn, sign our names, and walk out under a pale gray sky that feels like synthetic daylight. But the weight in my gut won't lift. That afternoon, I can't stay at home. My apartment feels wrong, every wall too close, every corner suspicious. I drive south on A1A past the pier, past the boarded-up motel where I first heard breathing in the ceiling. My cruiser's radio is off. Rain-slick asphalt glistens in the waning drizzle. I pull into the empty lot across from the kids' house and sit, engine idling, staring at the squat bungalow through the chain-link fence. I watch for movement, anything that might argue against normalcy. The air smells of salt and decaying seaweed. I close my eyes, inhale, and in that moment hear a faint knock, not on glass but wood, as if someone rapped from the inside of the walls. My blood runs cold. The knock comes again, timed, deliberate, as if signaling hello. I slam my palm to the steering wheel, nearly cracking the plastic horn cover. Then nothing. I shake my head, start the car, and pull away without thinking. But something in the rearview catches my eye. Black-clad figures pressed against the living room window, staring back. I slam on the brakes. The figures vanish, and the window reflects only my own eyes, wide and unblinking. Later, at the station, I throw my gear into my locker, but my hand hesitates on the moldings. Fingernails still jagged with bits of that drywall scrap. I thumb through the evidence cabinet, heart racing, and pull out the clear envelope labeled Adam's House, panel fragment. I stare at it, through the plastic, translucent filigree of paper-thin gypsum, etched with grooves like half-formed fingerprints. I peel it open, let it rest on my palm, and trace the ridges. Something inside me twists. Fear? Guilt? Curiosity? I can't tell. I slide it back in and seal the envelope. I don't log it. I don't tell anyone. By nightfall, sleep evades me. I toss and turn, mind replaying that closet opening. 3 faces, bare and pale, pressed so close their cheeks merged with the drywall. I feel their breath on my neck. I reach out in the darkness and clamp my hand around the drawer pull at my bedside table. Under the false bottom, I retrieve the fragment again. My fingers tremble. I press it to my face. I swear it hums, like a tuning fork vibrating in air. I jerk my hand away, drop it back in the box, and fall into restless half-sleep. When dawn arrives, I'm already up. I shower, dress, and head out without breakfast. I find Steve leaning against his cruiser, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee. He says nothing as I climb in beside him. He watches me in the side mirror, the way I tap my fingers against the dash, the haunted set of my shoulders. Finally, he says, "We need to go back." "Back where?" I snap. "To the motel, the one off 27. He jerks his chin toward the highway exit. "Where Adam's mom used to work. She said she saw people coming and going at odd hours, figures slipping through the back fence." His voice goes quiet. I figured it was nothing. I didn't want to push, but after last night, he looks at me. I don't think it's nothing. I hesitate. The last time we went in blind, Adam nearly died, yet every instinct says, go. I nod. We pull onto the interstate. The Desert Wind Motel sits under a dull neon sign that sputters, "Vacancy." The parking lot is empty except for a single rusted Chevy Impala from the 90s. Moonlight glints off a broken window pane. Wind rattles the siding. We park, engines off, and approach on foot. Steve keeps his rifle trained low. I carry only my flashlight and sidearm. Room 12's door hangs open, paint chipped, frame swollen. Inside, the bed's mattress is stained dark at the corners. The dresser drawers are pulled out and upended. I flick my light across the nightstand. A Polaroid photo, corners curled, lying face down. I flip it. The 3 faces from the closet, mouths moving, though no sound. I slam it back down, light bouncing across its glossy surface. He didn't live here, I whisper. Why is this here? Steve scans the bathroom. The mirrors cracked, tile floor caked with mud. He kneels, shining his beam at the toilet. Water pooled around the base, ripples frozen as though something moved just before we entered. He straightens. The drain. His voice quavers. It's clogged. He kicks the porcelain. Water sloshes. I circle the room, beam passing over a ventilation grate near the ceiling. I hammer on it. Researcher's instinct telling me something's behind it. The grate rattles, metal buzzing. I yank it down, dust billows. My light enters a space so small I can't even see the back wall, but through the darkness, I swear, I feel eyes on me. My pulse pounds. I'm about to back away when something brushes the tip of my boot, a scrap of drywall flecked with white. I kneel, pick it up. My breath catches. The same ridged pattern. I turn it over, a smear of dark red at one edge, like rust or dried blood. Behind me, Steve swears. He points to the closet. I whirl. The door stands ajar, though I know I didn't touch it. I take one step, then another, and the door swings fully open. Inside, the closet is empty save for a single hanger and a faint pulsing glow from the back wall. The closet's back panel bulges outward, quivering as though breathing. I snap off a glove, reach out. My fingertips graze the surface. It ripples, then splits with a soft tearing sound. I yank back as 3 hands emerge, pale, gaunt, fingertips thin as moth wings. They vanish back through the crack, which seals itself with a hiss of displaced air. The panel snaps flush. My heart hammers. I press my palm to the wall, warm, unsettlingly so, as if some organism lurks behind it. I turn to Steve, voice thick. We need to get him back. Not Adam, but the faces. The lost souls pressed into our world. Their eyes follow me. The motel door slams in the wind outside, and in that instant I realize I've crossed a line. I'm not just investigating anymore, I'm stalking shadows. Behind us, the soft click of the closet door echoes, and neither of us moves. The storm returns, distant thunder rolling through the planks. My breath hitches as I realize the lull won't last. Something is waking. I barely register the wind howling through the broken window as I yank Steve away from that glowing wall. Our boots scuff the threadbare carpet, leaving dark streaks. We stumble into the hallway, each of us drenched in sweat despite the chill that's settled over this place. Steve presses his back against the door frame, rifle trained on the closet we just disturbed. I grip the stock of his weapon with one hand, holster my own sidearm, and jam my flashlight under my chin to scan the corridor. The motel's single, flickering corridor light sputters overhead, bathing, peeling wallpaper in sickly yellow. At the far end, the neon vacancy sign through the rain-spattered windows stutters on and off, making the shadows dance like specters. I glance back at room 12's doorway, now silent. The closet, once again a sealed wall. My pulse pounds so loud I'm certain the echo must fill the narrow hallway. "Call it in," I whisper. My voice cracks. "Back up, SWAT if we have to." Steve's fingers move over his radio, but the knob sticks. He curses low. I realize both our radios are dead. No signal, no static, just silence. My flashlight sweeps over the blue carpet, stained, frayed, a trail of dark splotches leading toward the stairs like a breadcrumb path. Steve notices them too. "Blood?" he rasps. I kneel, torch beam landing on a droplet the size of a quarter, bright red against the muted carpet. Then, another and another, spaced about a foot apart. The trail curves toward the stairwell. My stomach twists. "They're moving," I say. He grips my shoulder. "They go in the walls, they'll slip away." I look back at the closet. No sign of force, no cracks around the molding, no gaps. It's solid. The bloody trail moves away as if tracing an invisible line through the hallway. I swallow, heart racing, and pull Steve toward the stairs. Each step groans under our weight. The blood smears across the wood, darker where soaking into the grain. Light catches the droplets, turning them into tiny rubies cascading down. At the bottom, the lobby's desk is half collapsed, papers strewn across the broken tile. A single overhead lamp still glows, humming with low throb. Behind the counter, a ledger lies open, entries scrawled in looping cursive, names crossed out in thick red ink. I flick through. Dozens of guests, rooms 1 through 16. Room 12 is at the bottom, highlighted with a shaky circle. Beside it, a note in the same red ink. "Do not wake them." My breath catches. Steve lifts a chipped, dust-covered bell from the desk, examining its tarnished surface. "They meant this," he whispers. "What do you think that means?" I ask, voice taut. He doesn't answer. Instead, he points to a door at the far right, staff only, its paint blistering. The hinges are loose, rattling on the wall. We slip through without pushing. The door swings open to reveal a narrow utility corridor, cluttered with mops and trash cans. The walls here are raw plywood, water-stained. A crawlspace entrance at the end gapes open, darkness yawning below. I drop to my knees, shining the beam inside. The opening is just big enough to fit a person on hands and knees. Damp air exhales from the void, smelling of rot and chemicals. The plywood around the opening is scored. Deep grooves like nails were used to widen it. My pulse spikes at the thought of what might have been dragged through. "Ready?" Steve asks, pulling a short crowbar from his coat pocket. I nod and hand him my flashlight. He pries at the edge while I shine the beam. The panel cracks free with a splintering sound. As he swings it aside, the crawlspace yawns open to reveal a narrow tunnel sloping down. The floor is layered with dirt and debris, rusted pipe fragments, broken glass, patches of what looks like dried blood. The walls are peppered with scratches, some fresh, some caked with grime. Steve scoots in first, flashlight ahead like a beacon. I follow, my uniform catching on exposed nails. The tunnel ceiling presses close, forcing me to hunch. Water drips from unseen joints plinking onto my shoulder. Steve's light bounces off something further ahead, glints of metal, maybe tools. I swallow bile as I remember Adam's missing time, the faces in the motel and the house. The connection tightens like a vice on my gut. We press deeper. The tunnel curves, then climbs at an incline steeper than I expect. My boots slide on the damp earth. I hear Steve curse ahead, then the rat-a-tat of chisel striking stone. The tunnel opens into a larger chamber, low-ceilinged, rough stone walls. Our lights reveal hundreds of shallow alcoves carved into the rock, each about the size of a shoebox. In every alcove, a small, angular object rests. I move closer. Jagged shards of drywall, splintered wooden panels, shards of mirror. Bits of plaster and warped door molding lie in neat piles. My breath hitches at the realization. It's a museum of their victims, their trophies. I stumble back, chest tightening. "What the hell?" I whisper. Steve doesn't answer. He aims his light at the far wall where a crude altar stands. A wooden table scarred with cut marks, ringed by broken chairs. On it, a binding of photos, Polaroid after Polaroid, faces staring out in frozen terror. Adam's house faces, the motel closet faces, dozens more I don't recognize. Beneath them lies a ledger, its pages filled with dates, initials, room numbers. The pages flip under some unseen breeze, though no wind exists this far underground. A low hum begins, vibrating through my bones. At first, I think it's my own heartbeat. Then I hear chanting, too faint to discern words, rising in crescendo from a distant shaft. The hairs on my forearms stand. I glance at Steve. His rifle is raised, but he looks paler than I've ever seen. From behind us comes a wet, scuffling sound. I spin, torch sweeping the tunnel entrance. Two figures step forward in the beam, clad in tattered gray robes, faces painted in the same white and red patterns I saw pressed inside Adam's closet. Their eyes gleam with fanatic calm. One holds a torch dripping tar. The other cradles a box filled with plaster fragments and nails. They don't move further. They just stand, observing us. I feel my voice catch. "Drop it," I say, but my tone is wavering. The chanting grows louder, echoing off the stone ceiling. The robed figures glance at each other, then slowly raise their arms, revealing dozens of small pouches tied around their waists, each embroidered with cryptic symbols. The chanting becomes a chant of names. My name, Steve's name, and the words slip through our minds like a cold whisper. I realize then, they know us. They studied us. They recorded our faces, our cases, our fears, the plaster trophies, the ledgers. They didn't just collect victims, they collected stories. Our stories. Steve fires a shot. The bullet cracks against the stone, sparks flying. One figure tilts its head, studying the bullet hole as though curious. The chanting stops instantly. Silence crashes down like a wave. I fumble for my radio, but still nothing. The only sound is our breathing, ragged and harsh. I steady the flashlight on the nearest robed figure and ask, voice trembling, "What do you want?" The figure steps forward, bare feet making no noise on the earthen floor, and raises its head. Where its mouth should be, there is only a smooth mask of pale plaster. Then the mask splits open, revealing a mouth stitched shut, lips crudely bound with rusted wire. It tilts its head and, in a voice that burrows into my skull, whispers, "We already have what we need." The box it carries rattles, as if impatient to be opened. I raise my rifle, trembling. The creature's stitched lips press tight around the words, "You belong to the walls now." A crash echoes behind us, rocks shifting, a beam splintering. Light floods the chamber as the crawlspace entrance collapses. Debris rains down. I tackle Steve, sending us sprawling. The robed figures vanish into the shadows, torchlight snuffed out. We scramble to our feet, coughing as dust fills the air. The chanting starts again, distant, like voices trapped between layers of rock. The plaster photos on the altar flutter, pages tearing free and swirling like dead leaves. I grab Steve's arm. "We get out, now!" He nods, eyes wide with something I recognize, terror. We dash back into the tunnel, the screech of rock collapsing behind us. Each bolt of stone ricochets above like thunder. I keep the light on the ground to watch for that bloody trail, but it has vanished. Only footprints, ours, streak the mud. We burst into the lobby just as a flash of lightning cracks the sky. My chest burns, lungs heaving. I glance back. The motel's neon sign sputters and dies. The building's windows pitch black. A moment later, the door slams shut on its own. We stand in the rain-soaked lot, the desert wind whipping at our uniforms. My adrenaline crashes, leaving a hollowness behind my ribs. Steve lowers his rifle and looks at me, lost for words. I drop my flashlight into the mud and place a hand on his shoulder. "They're everywhere," I whisper, voice raw. He nods, swallowing. "What do we do now?" I look back at the silent motel, its walls hiding secrets we're only beginning to understand. My stomach twists with dread. I lean closer to Steve, voice barely audible over the storm's dying roar. We keep digging. The dawn light was pale when we finally limped back to the cruiser. My uniform was soaked, mud streaked across my chest. Steve's boots were half filled with water. We didn't speak as I fumbled with the door handle, each click echoing too loud in the empty lot. I slid behind the wheel, shoved the key into the ignition. The engine caught with a groan, then settled into a low rumble that vibrated through my ribs. Steve climbed in beside me without a word. We sat there for a long moment, listening to the car's tremor, watching the motel's outline recede through the rearview mirror. "I'll radio it in," Steve finally said, voice rough. "Call this in as whatever the hell it was." I didn't respond. I adjusted my collar, tried to lift my gaze through the smeared windshield. The motel sign was gone. Just the charred metal stub beneath a gray sky. The world felt muted, as if color and sound had been leached away. I shifted into drive and peeled out of the lot, tires spitting gravel behind me. We didn't take the main road. I knew the back routes, the rural lanes unlikely to have traffic. Better if whatever was following couldn't track us. The ride back was silent except for the engine's drone and our own breathing. I replayed every moment in my head. The faces pressed into drywall at Adam's house, the panel that snapped shut behind us, the doll-like plaster masks of those cultists, the crawlspace alcoves lined with trophies, and then the altar covered in photos, our own faces among them. I forced my eyes off the road, stared at Steve. His jaw was clenched, knuckles white against the steering wheel. We'd seen horrors before, mass shootings, body counts, but never this. This was something else. Intimate, invasive. They got under your skin, into your home. They turned walls into traps. Do you think they can follow us? I asked, swallowing the lump in my throat. Steve didn't answer at first. He kept his eyes on the cracked pavement, thumb resting on the radio knob. Finally, he said, "They know these places better than we do. They've been here before. How many times do you think they've crawled through that crawl space to set all of that up?" I closed my eyes, wincing as the motion triggered fresh bruises across my side. I thought of the three faces, so close I could have reached out and touched them, of the whispers echoing in the walls. "If we keep running, they'll just lead us on," I said. "We need to understand their pattern." Steve nodded slowly, agreed, but first, medical, refill, some decent coffee. I'm guessing you need to call the chief. I tapped the radio mic. Unit 5, requesting priority dispatch. Possible hostage situation with armed suspects? No, that's not it. Cult activity, multiple suspects. I slammed my fist on the wheel. "Damn it," Steve cut in. "Don't bother. The radios are dead. We'll use the cell." I exhaled. Of course, our radios were out, like some blockade around us. I placed a hand on my pocket, felt my phone vibrating. A text from dispatch. "All units report back ASAP. Is everything okay at Desert Wind?" I stared at the text, thumb hovering over the reply button. What could I write? "Not exactly. Please send hazmat and SWAT." Number. I deleted the message. "It's better this way," Steve muttered. "If we go through channels, they'll leak this. Chief will want details. We'll get tape. And whatever they are, they watch tape." I leaned my head against the headrest, eyelids heavy. "So what? Unofficial investigation? Back roads? We still need answers." He reached over, flipped the visor mirror closed. "Yeah, unofficial. We pick a place on their map and show up, throw them off rhythm." I considered that. If they were setting traps, house after house, motel after motel, maybe we could reverse the hunt. But I felt hollow at the thought. These weren't animals stalking prey. They were humans who'd turned into ghosts. And shutting their channel of communication, would that protect us or just anger them? We reached the station on foot rather than driving in, parked behind the building where the cameras pointed at a steel wall. No footage would survive. We climbed the stairs two at a time, jerking open the evidence room's door. The vault's dial rattled at the new drop-off we'd processed earlier. The drywall fragment, the Polaroids, the odd ledger pages marked "Do Not Open." I flicked on the overhead light. The small space felt cramped, suffocating. I slid the envelope from my locker and slapped it onto the stainless steel counter. Steve laid the photos beside it. My face pressed into the closet wall. Steve's rifle muzzle aimed at those painted eyes. Polaroids from room 12, from Adam's house, from the motel. I stared at myself in the glossy prints. My reflection cracked by the flash, eyes wide with fear. "Can't keep this secret," Steve said, voice low. Somebody needs to know. I picked up one photo. Adam's terrified eyes looking past the closet door, mouth frozen wide. Who? Chief? Internal Affairs? Journalists? Steve dropped his gaze. Maybe someone outside the department, a reporter you trust. He met my eyes. If we're up against something that's more ritual than crime, red tape won't help. I swallowed. This department had rules, reporting channels, evidence logs, oversight. We could be in deep trouble if we went rogue. But I also knew, if this got out, the cultists would be alerted. They'd vanish into the cracks, take their war underground again. So I slipped the photos and envelope into my inside pocket. We'll need more intel, I said. Locations, patterns. Anything that links victims. Steve rubbed his temples. I've got a guy. He handles peer review for dispatch logs. If we give him a list of calls, Adam's flood, the shots at the gas station, the hang-up at the motel, he can pull timestamps, GPS pings. Then we map them. See if there's a radius or path. I nodded, feeling the first spark of purpose since the crawl space. Okay, let's do that. Then we set the trap. We pick the next hotspot where they're weak, and we hit them hard. Steve glanced at the door. We should split this. You cover east side calls. I'll take the west. Meet back here in 3 hours. I stepped back as he pocketed his phone. I'll text you the dispatch logs, he said, encrypted. I watched him leave, the door clicking behind him. The room felt too small now, like a sarcophagus. I paced, heart ticking, mind racing with possibilities. If I chose the wrong hotspot, it could be another house with a hidden chamber. Another kid terrorized behind walls. I needed to be right. I opened my locker, reached for my service revolver, held it in my palm, 5 rounds, weight like reassurance. Then I slid it into my belt, because I'd need to be ready when they came for me. Outside, the station lights buzzed. I stepped out into the night, the air strangely warm. No rain, not yet. The clouds had broken into swaths of darkness, moonlight seeping through in bands. I looked toward the old bridge over the canal, one of Steve's calls from last week. A patrol cruiser found idling there, doors locked, with no one inside. Footprints led into the water, but nothing washed up. He said he'd revisit it, call it unexplained disappearance, but I knew another cult runway, maybe the next clue lay there. My phone pinged. A map, 9 pins blinking on a grid. Adam's flood, the Edgewater shooting, the hang-up call, the abandoned cruiser, now the motel, and 3 more calls I didn't recognize. They formed a ragged arc along the coastal highways. The next point was just north of the pier, a cluster of vacation houses. A house on Beachcomber Lane. Last call at 3:17 a.m. for a welfare check. Resident was mathematician who reported hearing voices in the walls, only he said they speak equations. His body was never found. I stared at the pin as a chill slid down my spine. They were moving south, west, then back north in a loop, always circling a zone where the Everglades meet the bay. A spiral. I tapped the northern pin, Beachcomber Lane, and zoomed in. The satellite image showed a modest beach house with a white picket fence and a single palm tree drooping over the roof. Too ordinary. Perfect. I locked the phone, slid it into my pocket. I exhaled, the tension in my chest shifting to steel. I'd been hunted, now I'd hunt back. The horizon flickered with distant lightning. No thunder yet, but rain would come. I glanced at the sky, clouds rolling in like an army. Tonight I'd stake out the next hotspot. I'd wait in the dark, listening for the scuff of boots in drywall dust, the whisper of chanting through the walls. And when they surfaced, I'd be ready. because this spiral ends where it began, beneath the surface in the spaces we ignore. And I won't let them vanish again. We rolled up to the Beachcomber Lane house just past midnight. The sky was a bruise of heavy clouds, the moon a sliver behind ragged edges. I parked 50 yards down the beach access, shuddering as salt wind carried the cry of distant gulls. Steve stayed with the cruiser, rifle angled across his lap. I grabbed my flashlight, my sidearm, and a small kit of tools. Crowbar, spare batteries, tape recorder. No radio signal, nothing but cell service patchy along the shore. I approached on foot, boots sinking in damp sand, leaving prints that were quickly erased by wind and tide. The house stood quiet. Weathered clapboard siding, paint peeling in sheets, a solitary porch light casting a weak halo. The picket fence sagged where the post had rotted away. I checked the front door, unlocked. That was suspicious. Most people lock their doors at night. I eased inside. The air hit me immediately. Warm, stale, tinged with mildew and something coppery. My flashlight beam carved across a small entryway, mat scattering sand, hallway leading back toward living spaces. The floorboards creaked under my weight. I moved slowly, listening. Nothing but the distant lap of waves. I swept the light through the living room. Upholstered chairs faded and empty. A fireplace cold and sooty. Family photos on the mantel. All smiling eyes looking past me. I didn't touch a thing. Ahead, the kitchen door stood ajar. I clicked on the tape recorder. Detective's log, 0302 hours. No sign of immediate hostiles. Proceeding. I hit record and smiled at my breath in the lens. It sounded too clinical, like a training drill, but every tool mattered now. I stepped into the kitchen, linoleum floor stained, sink piled with dishes, a single mug cracked in half. On the counter, a spilled bag of flour dusted the surface like chalk. Handprints smeared it. Small, wide, smeared with grit. I knelt, traced one print with a gloved finger. Tiny ridges. Not atoms, smaller than mine, but too big for a child younger than 10. A soft creak behind me made me spin. Nothing. I shone the Zabal light at the pantry door. Closed. I moved toward it, thumb high on the crowbar. Paused. I reached for the knob. It swung open. Inside, shelves were neatly stacked with cans that rattled when I touched them. But at the back, I noticed the drywall wasn't flush. The pantry's wall bulged in a perfect rectangle, low to the ground. I knelt and probed the seam. It gave way under slight pressure, just like before. My pulse spiked. I whispered into the recorder. Found suspicious panel in pantry. Suspect crawlspace entry. I slid the crowbar into the seam. Wood groaned. I pried slowly, widening a small gap. Something within hissed, like air escaping a lung. My breath hitched. I reached inside, fingertips brushing fabric. I pulled, a folded rag, dark with age. I yanked harder. Behind it, the panel opened enough to reveal a tunnel mouth. I hesitated, a heartbeat. Behind me, a faint scuffle echoed from the dining room. Shoes on floorboards. I shone the light there. Empty chairs knocked over, a table leg gouged into the hardwood. The rattle of something sliding across the floor. My arm felt heavy. I gripped my sidearm, pressing the barrel to the ceiling, then at the floor. "Steve," I called quietly. No answer. I switched the recorder off, stuffed it in my pocket. Then, without thinking, I slid into the tunnel first, my flashlight leading. The air was stale, close, thick with dust. My boots scraped over wooden supports. Insulation brushed my sleeves. After 10 yards, I came to a chamber, smaller than the last, dirt floor pocked with footprints. In the center, a shallow trough filled with water, reflecting my beam like a jeweled eye. I flashed the beam across the walls. Scratch marks high and low, drying mud lumps, handholds maybe. There was something carved into the far wall, a spiral pattern, etched deep, plaster chipped away to reveal lath. I ran a finger over it. It felt alive, as if it pulsed under my touch. A distant drip echoed, water falling into the trough. I raised my gun, beams converging on a dark shape at the far corner. It slithered out, first a hand, then a knee, then a body dressed in gray rags. It moved with deliberate slowness, emerging into the circle of light. Face painted white, mouth bound with wire. I recognized the pattern, the same cult mask from the altar. It raised one hand in a slow wave. I swallowed, mouth dry. The figure came closer, eyes locked on mine. I fired. The shot rang in the confined space, echoing as the figure staggered, dropping to its knees. Black fluid seeped from beneath the mask. I fired again, a second shot. The body collapsed forward, mask shattering, revealing skin pale and translucent. I knelt, heart hammering, and unmasked it fully. Beneath lay the flayed remains of something inhuman. No eyes, just smooth hollows dripping fluid. Its jaw hung agape in a silent scream. I slid back, retching. The creature's body dissolved into ash at my feet, drifting away on a swell of cold air. The trough's water drained into the floor, leaving the dust weeping brown trails. The spiral on the wall pulsed, glowing faintly, like embers. My flashlight's beam darted past the creature's hideaway. Another shape moved toward me. I whirled, raising my gun, but it was Steve, his face streaked with mud and sweat, eyes wild. "Detective, get out now!" He grabbed my arm. "They're coming!" A rumble shook the tunnel. Dust fell from joists above. We scrambled back the way I came. The passage contracted, walls closing in like jaws. My chest tightened. I could hardly breathe. Steve led, crowbar dragging behind him. We crawled on hands and knees, kicking loose nails and debris to slow the closing walls. Each second the tunnel shrank, hinges and rails bending toward us. We tumbled into the pantry, slamming the panel behind us, just as the walls collapsed into the crawlspace entrance with a thunderous crack. Flour dust plumed around us, settling on my hair. We stared at the sealed panel, chests heaving. "I thought you radioed for backup," I gasped. He shook his head. "No signal. I came looking when I lost you on my phone's tracker." He pressed his ear to the panel. Nothing but silence. I wiped flour off my face. "They triggered it." "Yeah," he said, voice hollow. "And now they know we're here." I glanced at the front door. The sand outside was undisturbed. No tire tracks, no footprints. Just wind-blurred shoreline. The house was a tomb of secrets. I checked my watch, 0357. We'd been underground for 10 minutes. Already the tide would be creeping up the beach. Daylight wouldn't matter. These cultists were creatures of the dark. I met Steve's gaze. "We need to end this," I said. "Pick the ritual site, they have a pattern. The spiral, the crawl spaces, they map a circle. Beachcomber is one point. Next is back on A1A, mile marker 23, where the cruiser was. That old ranger station. They'll use it to finish whatever they started." He nodded slowly, holstering his rifle. Then we end it. We slipped out through the front, leaving the panel snapped closed. I locked the door on the way out. Odd, I thought, to lock a place we planned to destroy. We ran barefoot across the sand, plunged into the water to wash the flour from our shoes and ankles, let the chill tighten our senses. On the drive back to the mainland, I plotted the coordinates in my mind. Ranger station at 23, Edgewater Drains, Motel, Beachcomber Lane. The spiral tightened toward the Everglades. And at the center, the old outlaw hunting lodge none of us ever reported because it wasn't on any map. By the time we reached the ranger station, the sky was lightening. We parked in the shadow of cypress trees dripping with Spanish moss. The ranger station cabin was shuttered, windows boarded. I pulled on gloves, Steve loaded his rifle. We approached quietly, flashlights muted. The ranger gate was unlocked. We stepped inside. The air was cool, musty. Inside, the ranger's desk held scattered logs, reports of missing boats, vanished campers. On top lay a ragged book bound in leather, etched with the spiral. I picked it up. Pages sprang open on their own, revealing names, victims, dates, nearly 100 entries. And then, at the bottom, our names, just initials next to blank spaces. I looked at Steve. They're marking us. He swallowed. It's not just a ritual, it's a ledger. They're adding names. We heard it then. A low chant rising through the planks beneath our boots. Not outside, but inside the walls. The station's logs rattled, the boards groaned. My heart lurched as I realized we weren't hunting them. They were hunting us, collecting us into their ledger, weaving our stories into their walls. I raised the book. The spiral on the cover seemed to writhe under the flashlight's beam. I snapped it shut, tucking it under my arm. Steve whispered, "You ready?" I nodded, voice tight. "Let's burn it." He nodded back. We tipped over lantern oil from the shelf, doused the logs in the book. I struck a match. Flame licked the pages. The chant rose to a roar, echoes cascading through the cabin, as if the walls themselves wailed. The wood caught. I backed away. We watched as the station became engulfed in firelight, the spiral dancing on the walls in orange flicker. The ritual lodge went dark, the flames illuminating empty windows. As we turned to leave, I lost Steve in the glow. Then I felt it, my recorder vibrating in my pocket. I pulled it out. A single file named Section 8. I hit play. My own voice whispered, "Detective, come back." I snapped off the recorder. The chant faded, the spiral burned, and I realized with a cold certainty that this story was far from over. What if my last confession was just the first verse? The firelight danced across the pitted pine planks as we finally stumbled out of the ranger station, lungs hollowed by smoke, and nerves frayed like barbed wire. Steve's boots crunched on the scorched earth, the air thick with ash drifting like sooty snow. Behind us, the cabin's walls groaned and collapsed. The spiral carved into its timbers burning bright before collapsing into glowing embers. We didn't wait to watch it burn down to skeleton. The smell of char and curse chased us away faster than reason could keep pace. We plunged back into the swamp's edge, boots sinking into wet muck where moss hung limply from cypress limbs. Dawn was coming, stars fading, the sky bleeding pale blues and grays. I kept the ruined leather journal clutched under my arm, its scorched cover cracked but defiantly intact, pages singed at the edges like the margins of our own lives. Each name scratched inside carried weight. Victims, cultists, and now our initials beside that final blank line. I looked to Steve, his face rigid beneath grime, blood dried along his jaw, eyes haunted and unblinking. We had destroyed a ritual site and a ledger, but we hadn't destroyed them. They were already woven into every board and plaster fragment we carried in our pockets, in every radio silence and tunnel seam we'd awakened. We reached the gray ribbon of A1A, the highway slick with early fog. A lone pelican glided low over the water, silent witness to our flight. I leaned on the cruiser's hood, watching the horizon. "So what now?" I rasped, voice brittle. Where do we go from here? Steve rubbed his temples. We vanish, he said, almost to himself. Split up, lay low, try to rewrite our stories. Maybe drop into witness protection. No more houses, no more crawl spaces. They can't collect what they can't find. I spat into the road's center line, watching the droplet sizzle on hot asphalt. And pray they don't learn to hunt GPS signals? They've already learned our faces, our calls. They tracked us across the spiral. Now they'll watch our absence as a new clue. He exhaled, voice heavy with dread. So, what if we don't run? We fight back, make our own ledger, public, viral, expose the cult. He flicked his phone, thumb hovering over the upload button. News outlets, social media, live stream from the swamp, force them into the light. I swallowed. The idea made my stomach roll. Flood the world with our terror so they have no hiding place. But part of me recoiled. Shining a spotlight on them could also fuel their need, their pattern. They thrived in attention as much as in silence. You really think that works? Broadcast their next move? He turned to me, face resolute. Better than disappearing. If we go dark, they take the blank space as victory. But if we go loud... He trailed off, staring at the charred journal. We either break the spiral, or we become its next curve. I looked down at the pages peeking from the burnt cover, our names scrawled in black ink beside a gnarled symbol. The last line was blank, as if waiting for me to sign. A tremor ran through my hand. No, I said quietly. We don't feed them what they want. I closed the journal with deliberate force. We've burned both ledger and lodge. We survived the spiral they drew. Their story ends in ash. Steve's eyes narrowed. And ours? I squared my shoulders. We write our own, different lines. We walk away from this, but not into hiding. We let them come to us. On our terms. I opened my palm, revealing the plastic envelope from Adam's house, still sealed beneath my second skin. I've been keeping this and that. I tapped my pocket where the recorder lay. All the confessions, all the calls, we have evidence. He stiffened. You kept the panel fragment? I nodded. And the Polaroids, and the voicemails. We protect them behind locked doors. Strict chain of custody. Then we build a case so airtight that any attempt to bury it becomes impossible. We force the department, the media, everyone to treat it as real. The cult counts on disbelief. We use belief as a weapon. He exhaled, first time since Beachcomber. You're crazy. I shrugged. Maybe. But if we let them shape the narrative, we're doomed. This ends when someone pulls the walls down around them, literally and figuratively. We burn the stones, yes, but we also shine lights into every crawl space, every hidden panel, every missing person file. We expand the spiral outward until their pattern collapses under scrutiny. He studied me, jaw working. Then he cracked a half smile, one of relief or madness, I couldn't tell. All right, we write our own chapter. We take it public. I nodded, stepping into the cruiser. First step, we go to Chief Martinez. Lay out everything. No filters, no redactions. If they scrap this and mark us rogue, so be it. Then we go to the press. Live interviews, evidence dumps, protect Adam's mom, the kid who heard footsteps in the bayou. We give every witness a platform. The cruiser's engine droned as Steve slid in beside me. He fired up the phone, screen bright against the dim interior. You draft the memo, I'll start contacting reporters. We bring this to light before they can vanish the evidence again. I pulled the recorder from my pocket, flicked it on. Static cracked, then my voice. Low, world weary with years I can't escape. Detective's final log, spiral theory. The cult uses hidden spaces to collect bodies and stories. Ritual sites form a spiral path across Florida's highways. Our thesis, destroy their hidden realms and expose their ledger publicly. Plan, present evidence to internal affairs, contact media, secure witness protection for bystanders. Goal, collapse cult's secrecy, force exposure, and the spiral. I hit stop. The recorder's red light blinked once. I turned to Steve. Ready? He exhaled, then exhaled again. Yeah. He pressed send on an encrypted message to dispatch logs. The phone chimed, a confirmation. He nodded, as if that tone meant survival. We drove away from the swamp, the highway stretching like a ribbon toward the city lights. Below us, the Everglades stretched endlessly, silent threats hidden beneath reeds and mud. But at least now we carried fire in our pockets, voices on our side, and evidence too damning to ignore. The spiral had been drawn. Now we would trace its lines backward, erasing every curve, every hidden chamber. We would write the final ledger ourselves. And when they came for us, we'd be waiting, with lights, cameras, witnesses, because the walls could only keep secrets until someone climbed inside them and told the world what they heard.